After the runaway success that Assassin's Creed was for Ubisoft, it seemed like a follow-up was a foregone conclusion, and after a teaser showcasing one of Leonardo da Vinci's famous flying machines, fans got their first confirmation of the new game, and was going to take place in Renaissance Italy. This game wouldn't follow the exploits of Alteir entirely from the first game, although he would make a brief appearance. This time around, we'd be stepping into the late 15th century shoes of a young Florentine noble hell-bent on revenge by the name of Ezio Auditore. This was a new, unfamiliar, and unproven protagonist, but it wouldn't be long before he was Naruto running his way into our hearts. In November 2008, Ubisoft announced that a sequel to Assassin's Creed was in development just a year before the game was due to launch. The AC2 team was given whatever they required to make a, quote, monster game. It would be tasked with the lofty goals of repeating the success of the first game, but also correcting every criticism it faced. A lot of the details we have of the development process of Assassin's Creed 2 comes from a GDC talk given by lead designer Patrick Plourde. The decision was made to return to what core gameplay elements really made Assassin's Creed, what Plourde calls the three pillars: combat, navigation, and the social stealth system. For combat, it was decided to lean into the timing-based combat style, keeping the flow of encounters between you and your tactical observations of your enemy, rather than executing difficult button combos. They added new enemy types that would force you to think differently about each encounter, and a new set of weapon types to challenge certain behaviors. The second pillar, navigation, is one that Plourde didn't quite feel like people understood the point of. Sometimes, a lot of times, you go on the forums. They say there's no challenge. You just hold down two buttons, that's it. The system does everything automatically. There's a reason for that. It's a conscious decision because we want to focus our movement on fluidity. The challenge doesn't come from the input, it comes from the environment. When you look at a district of Venice from above, it's like the environment is a rat's maze. It's extremely complex to navigate. It's not just a 2D layout. Every surface is climbable in the game, so the challenge for the brain is to map that matrix. That's where the players are challenged. This is a concept I picked up on in my AC1 video, with my main criticism being that the fluidity itself was stunted. In this, I think the dev team and myself see eye to eye. The parkour should be simple because it's meant to be an extension of the player's ability to problem solve. If the movement is fluid enough, players aren't going to think about the second-to-second button presses. They're thinking about using the matrix to escape the cards as fast as they can, because that's the best way to get out of the situation. Finally, there was the third pillar, social stealth. Cause sure, figuring out how to get out of a tight situation is a form of problem solving, deciding to avoid one entirely is as well. Quote, instead of using light and shadow to make you invisible to enemies, it's your social behavior that makes you invisible. If there's a killer in the room, nobody's going to know he's a killer until you see behavior that isn't normal. In AC1, the problem I had with the stealth system is the fact that it was just kind of broken. It worked some of the time, but to really take full advantage, required players to treat the stealth as an unreliable game mechanic, breaking immersion, and I'm sure more than one controller. Plourde acknowledges this too, saying, quote, in AC2, what we wanted was to use the crowd as a gameplay tool. In AC1, we had that nice technology where we could display 150 NPCs on screen, so it looks really impressive, but each one of those 150 NPCs would be there just to make your life miserable. You'd bump into them, they'd jump and scream, guards would detect you, and bad things would happen. What we wanted was to challenge that and use the crowd for something that is positive for the player. We'd use it to blend, and while it's still visually impressive to have 150 NPCs on screen, they're also there to help. We'll get into just how true this really is a little bit later on in the video, but the end result is clear. If the social stealth, or any of the three pillars for that matter, were improved, as close to perfect as possible, the mission structure could lean on them more effectively. And I do mean lean on them. Not all the gameplay mechanics of AC2 are slam dunk. As Plourde explains, quote, every time we made a tweak to one of the three gameplay pillars and we went to playtest, the impact we had in terms of fun was greater than even if we implemented 20 other features. It was really noticeable. So the thing is that other features can have less polish and you'd still have a really great game. The important thing is not to cut them. Something I found incredibly interesting was the heat maps. The team created these to track how the changes to the parkour system affected how players traverse the map. On May 18th, this playtester stuck to mainly roads and some lower one-story buildings. However, after some tweaking, on June 22nd, they observed another playtester taking a much more varied route through the city. I've only really touched on a small bit of the talk, and I highly encourage you to check it out for yourself, but I'm not trying to sell you on this game. That's the job of marketing, which for Assassin's Creed 2 was pretty insane. Leading up to E3 in 2009, fans got drip-fed details from interviews, they got that previously mentioned teaser, and a look at the new protagonist and some concept art. But on June 1st, in the year of our Lord 2009, we got this beauty. This would be the first in a long line of cinematic trailers that would offer a glimpse into the world of each subsequent game. Another part of the hype machine and a perfect example of late 2000s marketing is the 3-part short film Assassin's Creed Lineage.
(1476), the dawn of a new era for Italy. Art, culture, and science are flourishing under the guidance of inspired minds. Renaissance. This is probably the way history will remember us. But in the shadows far from the gold and the knowledge lies another truth. Corruption, betrayal, murder, secrets.
This was released in the weeks leading up to the game's launch and featured the entire cast we would see in the game, mocapped with their voices and likenesses included. Except for Ezio, who is played by Devin Bostick. Don't recognize that name? It's fucking Roderick from the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. He does his best.
Tell me, Papa, why is it that a banker leaves so often in the middle of the night?
Yeah. It was developed by Hybrid Technologies, a Montreal-based post-production company that worked on 300 and Sin City. And you can kinda tell. Everything has this weird splash of sepia and CG movements draped over actual actors that make the whole piece come across as very dreamlike. Ubisoft acquired them specifically to launch this sort of mix between games and other media, but looking at their body of work now, it looks like they've continued to serve as a VFX house under Ubisoft, with their recent notable work including The Mandalorian Season 3, and basically every live-action Disney Plus Star Wars show. But back to Lineage. It's a pretty mixed bag, honestly, in some really infuriating ways. Like, there is just pure, genuine intrigue and some killer acting, sandwiched up against some of the worst, tension-spoiling, Coronation Street level soapy bullshit. Actually, no, to call it that is an insult to Coronation Street.
Protect this letter with your life until it is delivered. Do you understand me?
Go to Campo San Anzolo. Next to the wine merchant, there is a statue. Our man will be waiting for you there.
The story is fantastic. It's set in the months leading up to the events of the game, and shows just how capable Giovanni was, and almost makes me wish we could have seen more of him in his assassin mode, or even played as him in the game, you know? Like maybe for the first third of the game, before doing a little title card fake out, and then suddenly you play as his son? Oh, okay. The scriptwriter on Lineage, William Raymond, worked closely with AC2 writer Corey May to make sure everything flowed together seamlessly between the two. For example, we get to see the hidden blade get damaged, and in some foreshadowing, at the end of the day, it has infinitely more charm and spirit in a 35-minute runtime than the 2016 Assassin's Creed movie, which you will never see on this channel, had in its entire production. Just take some of the iffy, made-for-TV-esque moments and roll with it.
Dark skies are rising over Florence and time is running low. The enemy is closer than I thought. Now, the final battle is about to unfold. Every man is mortal. Every life comes to an end. But certain things will never change. Federico and Ezio, my sons, always remember. We are the Auditore di Firenze, and we are assassins.
Now, before I start working through the story, there's one more important piece of tie-in media to mention, and that's the companion novelization of the game called Renaissance by Oliver Bowden. It serves to fill in a few gaps that the game forgets to, as well as brings a bit more background to certain events. Because I like you, I went ahead and read this too so I could better capture the vast multimedia experience that is Assassin's Creed 2. Okay, on with the story.
My name is Desmond Miles. I'm a prisoner of war. A war I never knew existed. Waged by two groups I never thought were real. Templars and Assassins.
Starting out, we get a thorough explanation from Desmond about the story so far and the events of the first game. Apparently, Lucy is and was always on our side. I don't know if there's something I missed in the first one that indicates this, but more importantly, does Abstergo not have in their hiring practices to check if anyone is missing their ring finger? It seems like a bit of an oversight. Lucy shows up, covered in blood, with some serious crazy eyes, and answers Desmond's whinging exactly how I'd want her to. Like, what's with the blood? What do you think, Desmond? It's not that hard. A pissed off blonde chick covered in blood tells you to get in the Animus, you get in the fucking Animus.
Desmond, I promise I'll answer all of your questions later. But right now, I need you to just shut up and do what I say. So please, get in the Animus.
Once we're chipped in, we see that Desmond, Subject 17, shares a memory in common with an unknown Subject 16, the memory in question in Renaissance Italy. You know, of all the places to get yanked into, you could do a lot worse than Italy. The short intro where they teach us how to use the puppeteering system again is fucking hilarious. You're a baby and you have to use each of your limbs, but this has to feel weird for Desmond. He's not watching the baby, he is the baby. Lucy gets the name of our ancestor, Ezio Auditore da Firenze, and we're on our way. And if you're playing this game with a controller, there's a good chance you got through that little puppeteering tutorial without any issues, but started to notice them right about here. AC2 doesn't really have any major caveats to get running. The install and boot process is very simple, but it does fall into the same category of broken controls as the first game did, which means that you won't be able to just plug in and play a controller. Fortunately, the solution here is the exact same one I used for the first game. Just use a tool like X36CE to emulate a Wire 360 controller. Of course, that's just one of many options open to you, just take a look on Google. Getting back to our escape, we get to see more of the Abstergo environment and it is incredibly cool. The guards are maybe a little ineffective for being assigned to an area where a captured assassin is being held, but they couldn't anticipate this being an inside job. Lucy explains that she rigged the cameras to loop old footage and that she's the one who covered our asses in the first game when we were snooping around when we were meant to be snoozing. Turns out she's been assassinating a lot more than just our circadian rhythm. So we beat up some more guys, all while seeing what sort of scale Abstergo is operating at. Getting out into the larger area, I'd say this all looks a little boring, but this is absolutely what a biotech company in the mid to late 2000s would have as an office, just taller. We do get a neat little instance where Desmond uses his eagle vision to figure out the code to a locked door, confirming that in canon, he has also seen National Treasure 2.
How did you do that?
I don't know.
Of course, everything up until now has been our warm-up set, since in the garage we run into the staple for Assassin's Creed 2, a bukkake of bad guys. Now, I actually think the combat system in this game is infinitely better than the first one, so I'm gonna get my complaints out of the way early. Yes, it's a little boring that all the enemies just stand in a circle and attack you one at a time. You're probably thinking, well, in real life, they would just dogpile you, but you'd be wrong. They'd shoot you. Regardless, the copy and pasted bad guys go down pretty quick. The unarmed combat system already doesn't feel as narrow in scope as in the first game. It's losing a bit of realism, sure, but I'm chalking it up to trying to make Assassin's Creed feel a bit more like a brawler when going unarmed. And that's fine to me because brawlers are fun. Wrapping up with the biggest workers' comp case in Abstergo's history, we snag a primo napping spot and hit the road. Arriving at the safe house, we find a large industrial space that has to be insane to rent, let alone the size of the electricity bill. Lucy tells us the assassins are losing. Maybe they should redirect some of that cash flow from the square footage of this place into, you know, literally anything else. We're then introduced to another important vehicle to further the plot, the bleeding effect.
So that's why you found him. My ancestor. What was his name? Ezio?
If you can follow in his footsteps, you'll learn everything he did, just like he did. Years of training absorbed in a matter of days.
Also, I love this little interaction where Lucy is like, "You need to trust me," and Desmond takes 2 seconds and is like, "Yeah, sounds good." Finally, we get to meet the family and get pretty much what I expected. There's Sean Hastings, the plucky British son of a bitch who's a giant twat for no reason, and the nerdy, elite hacksaw who's definitely not like the other girls, Rebecca Crane. Okay, you know what? That might have been too mean. Rebecca is consistently a sweetheart. I just got pissy because I really want to dunk Sean into a blender and make some bangers and mash. You can walk around and talk to everyone before jumping into the Animus, so let's start with Rebecca. She introduces Baby, her Animus 2.0, and absolutely rails on Abstergo for their lack of ambition. Rebecca is someone I would describe as having gumption, maybe even spunk. Not the same kind as Sean though. I speak to Sean next, and oh man what a punchable face. We find out that Sean's job is a glorified Google/Wikipedia guy. He updates the databases of things we find in-game. He also provides, quote, tactical support for other assassins in the field, who he refers to as actually doing things and risking their lives. Hearing him say this, it's clear that he feels like he's not doing enough/wasting time here, so I can see why he'd be a little pissy with us. Finally, we talk to Lucy, and Desmond apologizes, likely for trying to write up his dissertation while they were trying to escape. They have something of a moment, and wait, is that Kristen Bell?
Here we go.
Florence, 1476. I do plan on visiting Italy someday, but from what people tell me, AC2 isn't a bad way to experience it for the first time, because a historical simulation can capture a lot of things, but smell is not one of them. Here, we're introduced to this devil-may-care hunk named Ezio, and while you'd be forgiven for thinking he's 35, he's actually 17 here. We watch as he leads a group of ruffians against a rival gang from the Upper West Side. Oh, damn it, I made that joke in the first video. Just think of the warring families in Romeo and Juliet, except instead of Romeo, it's Ezio, and instead of Juliet, it's Vieri de Pazzi. You know, it's actually unfair how great I am at writing. Anyway, the people Ezio is leading is never really established. The Auditores and the Pazzis are rival banking families in Florence. It's said that the Pazzis have hired goons. I assumed as much for the Auditores, but if that was the case, then, well, I won't spoil it yet, but the Auditores could have used some more protection. Ezio taunts Vieri and his V squad into a fight, but not before taking a rock to the face, busting open his lip in exactly the same way as Desmond's. You know, if I even dig into that, we're gonna be here for fucking ages, but in the book, the cut was on his forehead. A fight breaks out, and we get to experience the hand-to-hand combat system again, and if you weren't sure earlier, you are now. It's better than in the first game in every way. Locking on enemies doesn't jerk the camera around. It's very clear from the get-go that you can strafe, grab, and even counter. Oh, and speaking of the counters, they're great. They strike a balance between legitimate fighting techniques and something Kenny Omega would do with a close friend. That is to say, they're fucking golden. Ezio's older brother Federico shows up and encourages his little brother in all the worst ways, but I get a sense he would never actually let Ezio fight if he didn't think he could handle it. After giving half of Florence's male population CTE, Federico insists that instead of chasing after the fleeing Pazzis, we should go see the doctor, after we loot the still writhing victims on the ground for some more Florence.
Search them. There's bound to be something in their pockets.
This mechanic supplements the pickpocketing ability we saw in AC1, and it's incredibly useful here. There's nothing better than being a few bucks short of a new weapon or armor piece when, luckily, there's a regiment of guards you just slaughtered that picked up their paychecks this morning. So we loot our victims and follow Federico to the doctor. We get there by free running, and while it feels a lot better than the first game because there aren't as weird janks on the geometry, I would like to know why we're doing parkour. Even just a one-off line. I get that they're racing, but where did they learn to climb like this? Where's the Ezio CrossFit workout? We get to the doctor, and look at this fella doing the whole plague doctor thing. I like it, even though the classic plague doctor as we've come to imagine them wouldn't look like this until around the 17th century. But remember the golden rule. If the fit's a sleigh, it can stay. Doc patches us up, and not 5 seconds after telling us to take it easy, we're racing Federico up the side of a church, accompanied by returning composer Jesper Kid's heart-pounding soundtrack. The music follows us as we scale the church, rising in intensity until we reach the top and get a lovely view of Florence. Plus, a title card and a taste of arguably Kid's most iconic work, a heavenly and melancholic track, an unofficial theme song for Assassin's Creed, Ezio's Family.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us.
Back to reality, Ezio notices his side piece's window is open, so he obviously jumps off the roof of a church, evades Vieri and his goons, and parkours his way up the side of a building for some late night gelato making. You know, gelato wouldn't come around for another few decades yet, so what I meant to say was that he's gonna go visit Cristina Vespucci because he wants some of that Cristina Vespucci. Okay, what I meant to say is that in the book, Cristina is the inciting incident for the confrontation on the bridge we saw when fighting Vieri for the first time. He also liked Cristina and tried to, do stuff a guy who looks like this would do, and now you're all caught up. The next morning, Ezio is caught by Cristina's father, and I guess yelling at some guards is enough to have them try to murder someone.
Guards! Guards! Voglio la sua testa!
We escape them, and I get to synchronizing some viewpoints. Yeah, the mechanic is still here, there's a lot more of them than in the first game, but there's actually way more to see on the map, so it is a lot more useful. Returning home, we arrive just in time to meet the Auditores. Patriarch of the Auditores, Giovanni, pretends to scold Ezio for fucking and fighting his way through his late teens before pulling an Uno reverse card and showing us he's a stone cold bromigo.
Your behavior is unacceptable. It reminds me of myself when I was your age.
I'm sure there's something to be said for encouraging your children's bad behavior, but I do appreciate that Giovanni at least has enough empathy to understand that kids will be kids. That doesn't mean they don't deserve some kind of punishment, but you don't judge them for making the same mistakes you did. You guide them to making better ones. Anyway, as we meet each member of the Auditore clan, we have to complete a quest for each one, both foreshadowing some later events and teaching us a few more game mechanics. For Giovanni, we have to deliver some documents, which will turn into courier missions later on. This one teaches us about how to maneuver through crowds, how to shove and navigate the masses that for 2009 are pretty insane. The intended recipient of the letter, Lorenzo de Medici, isn't home, so we return to Giovanni and overhear a conversation between himself and Uberto Alberti. Apparently one of the Pazzis is in prison, and Uberto is trying to assuage Giovanni's fears of something. Giovanni dismisses us when I run into Ezio's little brother Petruccio, and god damn, he's got those dead eyes and wants us to collect some feathers for him. I don't even know what he wants them for. This is the start of the dreaded feather collection quest. Sprinkled throughout the game, there are feathers that we need to track down. This is really only useful for an achievement, so I still haven't bothered to complete it. Next up is Ezio's sister Claudia, and from the sounds of it, her man's been fucking about behind her back because she won't sleep with him. And for that, I'm gonna go kick his ass. We find Duccio macking on this broad so hard he's literally floating off the ground. I love the fact that while I'm actively kicking his ass, he's all like, "You Auditores are big talk but don't do anything." Is that a challenge? Anyway, so we learn here that when we grab someone, we can do a bunch of stuff. We can headbutt them, punch them, or knee them, because the AC2 combat system is like an ogre. It's got layers. Finally, we catch up with Ezio's mother, Maria, and I absolutely love her. She's the definition of don't bullshit a bullshitter. Nothing gets past her. But like Giovanni, she isn't overly preachy about it. This one is an escort mission, but it's got some good stuff. We find out Vieri is so Vieri angry because his father Francesco is the one accused of murder, and Ezio's father is the one with the evidence. But more importantly, Maria knows Ezio's a poonhound.
Self-expression is vital to understanding and enjoying life. You should find an outlet.
I have plenty of outlets.
I meant besides vaginas.
Smoke weed every day.
Finally, we get to where we're going, and...
Hello, Leonardo.
Madonna Maria.
This is my son, Ezio.
Molto onorato.
L'onore è mio.
Let me go and fetch the paintings. I'll be right back.
Okay, so starting here, and even more in some of the older games, we are gonna just get the most gratuitous display of historical characters, but I will not speak ill of this. I love it. Hook it up to my fucking veins because I cannot get enough. Returning to Giovanni, he sends us to deliver some letters and stop by a pigeon coop, a staple in the Assassin's Creed series. The first letter goes to a thief and a courtesan. The second goes to a mercenary type fella. Then we visit the pigeon coop to pick up some mail. In doing this, we get to see a host of different characters, all representing different factions, and we see not only who Giovanni is cool with, but that Ezio clearly knows nothing about his father's dealings. He's visibly taken aback at both of the interactions he's had, and is slowly figuring out that something big is about to happen.
I have a delivery from...
Giovanni Auditore?
Yes.
Were you followed?
No. Why would I be followed?
Give me the package. Tell your father that they're moving tonight. He should as well.
Who's moving? What's going on here? Wait! Come back! Explain yourself!
As Ezio returns home, we find out that his father and brothers have been arrested and taken to prison, but fortunately his mother and sister are safe. Well, his sister is. It's heavily implied that his mother was assaulted by the guards when she resisted them, and so she's pretty traumatized, not speaking at all. We head out to see if we can speak to our father to find out what's going on. Before we left on his last errand, he informed us that there were some serious things that we needed to discuss. I have a feeling these were the serious things. This segment introduces us to one of my favorite mechanics, the notoriety bar. We'll return to this a bit more in depth later, but I wanted to praise this game because I remember in AC1, I was frustrated because I just didn't know how testy the guards were going to be. Whereas in AC2, this little gauge takes all that guesswork out. When it's full, guards are going to be up and inside of your anus just for spotting you. Later we'll learn how to reduce it, but for now, we have to learn how to maneuver when that isn't an option. After running around the prison for like 5 minutes trying to find where we need to climb up, we're able to speak to our father, who informs us that we need to return to the house and search his office for a hidden door. He says to use our talents to find it. The talent he's likely referring to is Eagle Vision, but I hate it being referred to by the characters in the game. Let it be a mystery, a fluke, not like the Force from Star Wars. Anyway, in the secret room is a chest containing some gear and a letter which we have to deliver to Uberto. I have a bad feeling about this, but I'm going to take that unease and push it real deep down because we get to see Ezio suit up for the first time. We have the Ezio's family track playing in the background. He even walks around with some extra swagger thrown in. It's like he just knows he's a piece of finger-licking Italian chicken. But these two guards that come to kill him, they're vegans. And you know what Italian chicken does to vegans? For real though, this scene is epic, but the longer I stop and think, the more thoughts I have. I pulled out my sword right away and killed the guards before the game had time to tell me that I could have just fisted these guys instead. Which is whatever, but we're never shown that Ezio knows how to use a sword, let alone is competent against two men whose entire profession can be summarized as live by the sword, die by the sword. What I do appreciate though is that we never get the obligatory, oh my god, I just killed somebody freak out that a lot of these games and media tend to have. We can see that Ezio doesn't shy away from violence, and just by nature of living in the past, death probably would have been more and more common. I mean, his parents would have been alive for the tail end of the Black Death, and one could argue that death is a theme explored in many Renaissance works of art. Showing up at Uberto's, Ezio is clearly interrupting date night, and while the bald man's words are comforting, the creepy dude literally lurking in the back with his hood up should have been some indication.
Don't worry, Ezio. Everything is going to be fine.
Things are not going to be fine. After apparently standing at Uberto's door all night, Ezio finds himself in the morning Italian sun, and understanding that his family is due to be tried today, I see fit to do some shopping. At the blacksmith, all that we have available right now is some leather gear, but I'm too broke to actually buy anything just yet. However, already this is heads and tails above the armor system in AC1. We'll come back to this when I have some more scratch, but returning to the task at hand, we happen upon the trial of our father and brothers. And by trial, I mean execution.
Giovanni Auditore, you and your accomplices stand accused of the crime of treason. Have you any evidence to counter this charge?
Yes, the documents that were delivered to you last night.
I'm afraid I know nothing of these documents.
He's lying!
Need to get closer.
In the absence of any compelling evidence to the contrary, I am bound to pronounce you guilty. You and your collaborators are hereby sentenced to death.
You are the traitor, Uberto, and one of them. You may take our lives this day, but we will have yours in return, I swear! We will!
Father! There! Grab the boy! He's one of them!
I'll kill you for what you've done!
Guards! Arrest him!
Ezio runs in and, despite shrugging off some guards earlier, has his sword batted out of his hands, which just goes to show how little skill he actually has with it. In fact, our only goal right now is to survive, but I can't help but feel like if I was in Ezio's situation, I would feel like a bit of a fraud, like I was playing Maple Leaf, dressed up in some fancy robes with no right to wear them. Maybe we can chalk Ezio's killing of those 2 guards earlier up to luck, since I'm very doubtful it was skill, but in our current bid to outrun our pursuers, I gotta call attention to the plethora of hiding spaces and the ease that I can maneuver into them. It took me literally 10 seconds to escape, a situation that in the first game would have required me to run around and kite half the guards on the map. Not that we're getting off that easy though. We're intercepted by Inetta, one of our family's servants, who informs us that our family is hiding at her sister's place, where the game will continue introducing the notoriety system. But first, Ezio practices his sword fighting. That's an obligatory joke since Inetta's sister runs a brothel, but her name is Paola and you best put some respect on her name.
You must be tired. Perhaps you'd...
No, grazie. I can't stay.
Why? Where are you going?
To kill Uberto Alberti.
I understand your desire for vengeance, but the Gonfaloniere is a powerful man. You are not a killer, Ezio.
Spare me the lecture.
But I can make you one.
And why are you going to teach me how to kill?
I'm not. I'm going to teach you how to survive.
We're on to the more hands-on lessons in becoming an assassin, and it's done so well here. When we delivered letters to the thief and courtesan earlier, Ezio was clearly put off that these people knew his father, but tying them into the Assassin's Brotherhood makes so much sense. Paola and the courtesans teach Ezio how to blend in. As Paola says, seen but unseen, who better to teach this lesson than sex workers? Both integrating them into the story in a meaningful and humanizing way, it's inclusion that doesn't feel pandering. In this next section, we learn the basics of stealth, blending into crowds and sneaking past guards, learning to pickpocket, and hiring groups of courtesans to help us move through the city. Next, Paola sends us in the direction of Leonardo to have our hidden blade fixed. This game takes a lot of liberties with the skills of Leonardo da Vinci, essentially making him our Q, and once again, I will hear no criticism of this. He's our sweet boy, and he must be protected at all costs.
I managed to decode that parchment of yours. It showed me exactly what to do. Now all that's left is to remove your ring finger.
Do it quickly.
I was only having fun, Ezio.
I stand by what I said. This scene also introduces Leonardo's cryptography skills, requiring him to decrypt a scroll containing the blueprints to the hidden blade, with him then offering to decipher any more codexes we come across. And speaking of hidden blade, a guard has come to harass Leonardo, unwittingly signing up to become Ezio's pincushion. Disposing of the body turns out to be easier than expected, since Leonardo has a stack of corpses in his workshop. This plays on another real-life study of Da Vinci, drawing on his work with anatomy. Leonardo being harassed by guards makes sense. In 1476, he was arrested on charges of sodomy along with 4 other men. I'm sure they were just indicted together, but in my mind, I like to imagine Leonardo was boning down when he got arrested. Ezio's got his own anatomical study on his mind, however. Returning to Paola, she's able to provide the location of Uberto, the man who we'll be experimenting with. We're gonna kill him. I need to be clear about that. But not before Sean treats us to a little info dump about him.
Uberto Alberti, trusted friend of the Auditore family. According to the history books, this guy was a saint. He prosecuted murderers, rapists, the worst criminals. One of the best lawyers in Italy, he won every case, in spite of the fact that he was self-taught. Now, I found a back door into the Templars' database server. I've been combing it for some kind of smoking gun. I found it. Apparently, Uberto's family was evicted by the Medici Bank. Uberto's been aching for revenge ever since. And the Templars promised him support. Ezio's father was standing in the way, and Uberto was jealous of his influence over the Florentine government. 2 birds with 1 stone, isn't it? It looks like Uberto used his election to the Signoria as his opportunity to strike.
We find Uberto with Lorenzo de' Medici of the Medici clan mentioned in the previous clip, and gain some insight into the finer goings-on of Florence's political scene. I won't get into it now though, because we've got a fat bald man to kill. We use a combination of all the skills we just learned like a sort of test to help us infiltrate the guarded cloister, which besides being a super fun word to say, apparently means an enclosed garden, usually surrounded by covered walkways. The more you know. And as soon as Uberto sees us, he knows he's fucked. And Ezio spares no time in confirming this theory. Red wine, that is not. Ezio then does the very logical thing of announcing to this large crowd of important so-and-sos, as well as the guards, that he is, in fact, still alive. He stops short of reading off his postal code and social insurance number, but he doesn't leave much to the imagination. Returning to Paola, she sends us on a mission to introduce us to the final notoriety mechanic, the wanted posters. Well, and heralds, but I remember people complaining the most about the posters. Essentially, if we do enough stuff to drive up our notoriety gauge, we will become notorious. And this is how we lower it. All over the city, there will be wanted posters with your face on them, and we have to tear them down. Each poster drops your notoriety by 25%, and we can find them pretty much everywhere. You can also bribe town heralds to stop telling people about you, but this can be pricey in the early game, and while wiping out 50% of your notoriety, it's barely more convenient than finding 2 wanted posters. You can also kill city officials who are alleged to be corrupt and spelling lies, but chasing them down never really felt like it was worth the 75% of notoriety it wiped out. Finally, it's now time to bounce from Florence to our uncle's pad in Monteriggioni. To do this, we have to escort our mother and sister out of the city. It's as fun as it sounds. At least with escort missions in AC2, you can order your people to wait in a certain area while you get to work.
Give me a minute. Useless bastard.
We get out of the city and hit the road to Monteriggioni, which I'm going to use interchangeably with Villa since it is a mouthful, but as we get to the city steps, we're intercepted by Vieri. It's a standard brawl, so while that plays in the background, I'll fill you in on the real-life Monteriggioni. It's an actual place, and from the air, the version in AC2 looks to be pretty similar, and indeed from street level there are some sites that carry over from the game. Mainly the church and the well, in that there is a well, I guess, but the main Auditore estate is based on the Villa di Maiano, which is way closer to Florence than Monteriggioni is. Okay, now that that's over with, we get one of the best character introductions in gaming history.
You have my thanks.
Keep the sword, Ezio.
Do I know you from somewhere?
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
Uncle Mario?
It's been too long, Nipote. Far too long.
Entering the villa, we get the spiel from Mario about the town, the history behind it, and he alludes to some of the things we'll eventually get to do to fix her up, since she's in pretty rough shape right now. Take note of how dreary and depressing it is right now, that'll become important later. Mario sends us out to the shops to outfit ourselves, saying he's going to continue our training to finish our father's work, but just what that is, we'll have to wait to find out. The answer will shock you. In visiting the blacksmith, let's take another look at the armor and weapon system. Armor is self-explanatory, every piece will increase our resistance, and I'm sure that gets factored into some sort of equation based on what we're being attacked with, but Ezio is something of a sponge in this game and can take a real beating. The weapons, on the other hand, have some far more important stats to pay attention to. You can see here while buying our dagger, there are 3 stats: damage, speed, and deflect. These come in handy not only when considering potential upgrades, but weighing the pros and cons of 2 weapons. For instance, a mace might have high damage and deflection, but be slow, and something like a scimitar might have high speed and deflection, but low damage. It's a simplified system when compared with most RPGs these days, but compared to what we had in AC1, this is galaxy brain level stuff. The other big thing we can do for the time being at the blacksmith shop is repairing our armor, which is something you're probably safe doing after every big engagement where you take a lot of hits. If a piece of armor breaks, it will limit how high your life bar can go, so it's worth keeping an eye on. Next, we buy some medicine, which is the other reason I'm not overly concerned about my armor, since it's not like an Estus flask in Dark Souls where there's a wind-up, it's just a simple left on the D-pad and you're magically healed. Returning to Mario, Ezio is dead set on leaving again, but our uncle makes the case that we should stay at least long enough to learn how to fight so we can protect the family while on the road. Do you know what that means, editing me? Combat tutorial? Combat tutorial. And I must say, it's rather effective. You're learning a lot of the boring, simpler type moves, and while you're doing this, Mario is filling us in on who exactly our father was.
No use dancing around, I suppose. Your father was an assassin, Ezio.
There are a few times where the fight dialogue overpowers the exposition a little, but otherwise, it's a fairly concise summation of what we already know, told to Ezio when we have a bit more time to focus on it. It doesn't feel like an overload of stimulus, but rather the developers respecting our time and the momentum of the story, especially the momentum, since these tutorials actually take place over a couple days. It's nice that Ezio both has time to realistically practice the new skills, and also to come to terms with the revelations Mario's dropping. And for the combat skills we're learning, it already feels like the flow is becoming more varied than it was in AC1. We're learning to fight more dynamically with the sidestepping, how to speed up the flow of an encounter with the taunt, and how to cut and run using the escape. Okay, the escape is really just canceling our lock-on, but we don't want to hurt Mario's feelings. But hurt Mario's feelings we do, because Ezio's all like, hey, thanks for the life-saving combat skills and putting up with Vieri constantly sieging you, but I'm gonna piece to Spain now. Mario is understandably upset after just losing his brother and nephews, and finding Ezio already wearing the gear of an assassin. I'm sure he got comfortable with the idea he'd found another ally in a fight that Giovanni had died for. But I can see Ezio's side too. This was his father's fight, not his. His heritage means nothing if he can't keep his mother and sister alive. This is not the Assassin's Creed title that heavily relies on the sins of the father trope, though it is a constant in the series that definitely started here. Chasing after Mario, we learn he's gone to take the fight to Vieri, and we make to follow him, but first we have to check in on our mother, Catatonio.
Ezio, look at her. I still can't get her to talk. She spends all day and night in front of those feathers Petruchio used to collect. She can't let them go. I don't know what to do.
This is where we get the goddamn feather quest, and before you ask, no, I didn't complete it. Our mother needs therapy, not avian chlamydia. Speaking of animal-based venereal diseases, we meet back up with our old pal, Horse, and ride for San Gimignano. The vibe of this locale is way brighter and more inviting than anywhere else we've been thus far, but good god did we just jump into Pop-In City. Look at that grass materializing out of nowhere. Meeting up with Mario and his men, we get the lowdown. Vieri has been expecting us, so the gates of the city are closed and guarded, but due to the massive size of the city, the south gate is only partially guarded. And let me remind you that we're only like 2 hours in, and we're pretty much already storming Whiterun. Mario takes his men and distracts the guards from the front, while we sneak in the back and open the gate. He also gives us some throwing knives, and where was the montage where we learned how to use these bad boys? They took us time to show Ezio learning to run away from a fight, but not how to use, what is, to a newcomer, a weapon with a huge skill ceiling and a margin for error. I feel like this mission should end with Mario taking Ezio to the ER to get some fingers sewn back on, or I'm calling bullshit. Taking out some guards and opening the gate, we find despite the large scuffle out front, no one in the city heard the train we were pulling on Garda-World like 40 meters away, but whatever. This mission also serves as an introduction to the mercenary class of follower, the somehow more hands-on faction when compared to the courtesans. And if you'll excuse me for one moment, we might be in the midst of a brutal power struggle, but that's not going to stop me from scaling this viewpoint. Finally, catching up to Mario, he sends us ahead to take out Vieri while he sorts the Pazzi's intestines by weight and length, something I'm not pleased to miss out on, but once I catch up to the rest of the club, discussing their clandestine plans in the middle of the street, I knew I had God's work to do. Fighting with Vieri and his boys on top of the parapet feels like something right out of a middle school production of Shakespeare, right down to the part where my uncle had to pull me off a dead Italian like he was Sid Farkas. And oh my god, this is... I know it's not supposed to be funny, but look at that fucking expression. And in one of the most memorable moments in this series, this is where Ezio learns his famous line from his uncle.
You are not Vieri. Do not become him. Che la morte ti dia le pace che cercavi. Requiesca in pace.
So long, Bowser!
Returning to our villa, we get a nice moment with Mario and his men. Their dialogue might sound like the first draft of a Disney movie, but the camaraderie is nice, especially seeing how young Ezio looks compared with the rest of the crew. It definitely feels like a rite of passage has been passed, and that celebration is certainly in order. But before we can get to the putanas, we gotta be putting on our reading glasses to see what was in that letter that we pulled off Vieri. And oh, just listen to this.
Vieri is brash and prone to act without forethought. And he has a habit of treating the mercenari like playthings. I have received reports of at least 3 men being disfigured as a result. But I do not think him, as you put it, beyond repair. Rather, I believe the solution to be a simple matter. He seeks your approval, your attention. These outbursts of his are a result of insecurities born out of a sense of inadequacy. He speaks of you often and fondly, and expresses a desire to be closer to you. So, if he is loud and foul and angry, I believe it is simply because he wants to be noticed. He wants to be loved.
See, Vieri wasn't such a bad guy. He just wanted to be closer to his father, to have his attention and support. Maybe if he got the upbringing that Ezio did, he wouldn't go around disfiguring innocent people, ruining lives, and conspiring with his secretive order to control the fate of civilization. But before we can go cut down Vieri's grieving father, we've got to see Mario's little art project.
Do you see the way the words cross from one page to the next?
There is something underneath it all. Some kind of map. Where is it supposed to lead?
Your father and I managed to make out bits of a prophecy scrawled across these pages. It was written by an assassin like us, who long ago held a piece of Eden. His name was Alteir.
He said it! He said it!
He spoke of something powerful and ancient hidden beneath the land.
What is it?
What indeed? Solving that little mystery is exactly why we collected these pages.
Then let me help. It's time I take on my father's work. All of it. I start with the page I took from Vieri. Leonardo will decode it for us.
Bene. Return here when time permits, and we'll add it to the wall.
And now that the purpose of the Codex Pages has been more formally introduced, it's now time to suspend your disbelief. I guess there are 4 Codex Pages already handily strewn throughout our little slice of the Italian countryside, and good thing everyone who lives here is honest and trustworthy because these sons of bitches are just sitting out in the open. Mario said he and Giovanni spent all their lives collecting Codex Pages, and they found like 5. Meanwhile, 4 of them were just sitting within half a kilometer radius of where they were sleeping. Good thing Ezio's fully on board with the cause now, because otherwise he would have been waiting a long time. And with that sequence over, we now have access to villa upgrades. Now's as good as any time to walk you through it and drop my 2 florins.
Salute, Ser Ezio! Shall we take a look at the list?
Remember how Mario was all like, hey, this place is a shithole, and then handed you a dirty 30 of Natty Light and asked you to fix it up? Well, this is how. There are 2 main benefits to upgrading the villa. The first is that upgraded shops give us a 5, 10, or 15% discount on goods, depending on what level of renovation they're at, which is great, but the other sweet thing is, as Italians, those small business owners pay us a cut for rent and protection. From ourselves. However it works, we get a cut of the villa's total value deposited into a chest every 20 minutes that we can pick up, and this can equal some big money with a bit of time and cash invested early on. So in a theme we'll revisit a few times in this game, you essentially have 2 options. Grind real hard early on and get the villa upgraded pronto to maximize your profits, or take your time and do it in steady intervals throughout your game. I always took the rise and grind approach to max everything out as soon as I could, and it did feel like having all that money sort of trivialized the early game and made the late game a little boring. Anything I wanted, I already had, and rarely was there an upgrade I wanted that I didn't have way earlier than the devs probably intended me to. However, I am somebody who will just buy whatever sword has the best stats and ride it out until something better comes along. So it's really up to you. That being said, there is one other upgrade that kind of trivializes a whole different set of in-game upgrades, but we'll get to that in a moment. Back to the villa, there are also a few smaller benefits to the upgrades. As a fun detail, the town in general starts to look brighter and less run down, along with more people roaming the streets, but certain areas that contain collectibles start to open up if you renovate the right things. These tend to be the non-merchant shops like the brothel, church, well, etc. Once you unlock them, make sure to go check them out, because I guarantee there's some cash or collectibles to be found. Speaking of collectibles, here's how to make the armor tiers feel totally obsolete. Following Mario under the villa, we come to find Alteir's armor hidden behind some bars, which, by the way, if they really wanted, they could totally pry that shit out of there, but to open it the right way, we have to collect 6 seals found throughout Italy that will allow us to retrieve that armor. It's the strongest in the game and never requires repair. However, as a small complaint, it also changes the color of your outfit and doesn't allow you to wear any of the fancy colors that I haven't even gotten the chance to tell you about yet. The seals I mentioned are collected by completing assassin tombs, which are larger dungeons that usually involve more puzzle and platforming as opposed to combat. I'll cover 1 or 2 of them, mainly the ones you have to complete to progress the story, but because they're purely based on gameplay without much narrative merit, I found there just wasn't much for me to say about them besides Assassin Tomb fun or Assassin Tomb bad. Again, I just went for it and collected all the seals pretty much right off the bat, but I would really only do that if you don't want to be excited to unlock newer armor tiers and outfit colors as you progress. The drip is at stake, you've been warned. But for now, let's return to Florence and our old pal Leonardo. And for those of you keeping track, it has now been 2 years since Ezio's journey began. For a game that sweeps through the decades such as this, I wish it did a slightly better job of reminding us. I'm going to be indicating the date from this point on to give you a better appreciation of just how much time has passed. Anyway, we bring our newfound codexes to Leonardo, and discovering one of them contains some new assassination techniques, we head out to his backyard to practice them.
I'll have my assistant set up some dummies for you to practice with. Hey, Vincenzo!
I hate it here. I hate this job.
Our circuit consists of killing from a hiding place, killing from a ledge, and finally the ultra-sweet air assassination. Do I feel like we needed to learn these things with ancient scripture from hundreds of years ago? No, they're pretty simple in execution. But I can wash that taste out of my mouth with the latest gadget Leonardo has discovered in his translations, a second hidden blade. Okay, maybe it's not that cool, but it does allow you to do this sick crucifix pose where you take out 2 guys at once. It's as cool as the pose where a guy will like cross 2 guns over his chest, but that is neither here nor there, because Leonardo has put us on the trail of one stone-cold fox.
There's someone I need to see while I'm here. I cannot approach him publicly. Would you know a way?
La Volpe.
The fox.
Shh.
Capisco. But do you know where a fox might roam?
Perhaps near the Mercato, where the thieves dwell. Sta attento, amico.
And of course, we cannot show up to the Thieves Guild in these basic-ass Giovanni-looking threads, so let's hit up a tailor and catch some Florentine drip. Every city you visit will have a new offering of colors to dye your clothes, usually related in some way to the overall vibe of a city. Venice has a lot of blues and greens because of the water and swamps, and Florence has a lot of reds because of all the extrajudicial bloodshed Ezio is getting up to. Is this visual storytelling? Back to our fox hunt, Leonardo points us in the direction of the Thieves Guild, near the Mercato, and after a very, very short pursuit, which somehow teleports us up to the roof, we finally meet him, La Volpe.
Back my money and we'll call it even.
Not so fast.
What do you want? Who are you?
They call me many things. Murderer, tagliagole, thief. But you may call me La Volpe. At your service, Messer Ezio.
He is all for helping Ezio find Francesco de Pazzi, and in his position, he's something of a nosy Nelly, knowing all about the comings and goings of the city, making him a useful resource to, as Ezio puts it, know where someone might be before even they do. Despite meeting all these critically important people, Ezio is a little slow on the uptake. It's clear his father had a relationship with La Volpe, which is why he helps us so readily, even leading us directly to the part of the city where we can spy on the Templars. Arriving, I like the fact that Ezio is out of breath from running balls to the wall across the rooftops, while this clearly older man is just fine. But here we're introduced to the catacombs under the city, and some mild tomb raiding as a nice foray into the assassin tombs I mentioned earlier. We drop down into the vault where Cher keeps all of her young blood sacrifices and get to parkouring. And this is the part where I tell you the free running mechanics are, on the whole, much better and less infuriating. Navigating these tombs where platforming is the name of the game kind of demanded Ubisoft get their shit together. And while I will admit maybe I was a little harsh in my AC1 video, I can for sure say that most of the times I messed up in AC2 while free running were entirely my fault. This is nice because it makes pretty much any platforming section more of a mental puzzle and less of an exercise in frustration. I also have to commend the level design of these sections. They're rarely all that complicated, but the switches and swingy elements all blend together in a very enjoyable way, making this chase scene feel all the more fluid. By the way, this is some bullshit. I should have been able to catch this fucker with a flying assassin blade through the back, but whatever, let's make them work for their gold. You know what, come to think of it, how dastardly are these guards? Like, sure, they're working for the bad guys, but I'm sure they don't have nearly as much insight into the finer details of Florentine politics. To them, it's probably just a revolving door of rich bastards who change the colors of their uniforms and nothing more. Oh, are they all dead? Okay, good. Getting to our hidey hole, we find out the Pope is in on it.
Swords, staves, axes, armor, bows. Our men will want for nothing.
I take this gift to mean the Pope consents.
He gave his blessing to the operation, as long as nobody's killed.
We're all set for the Duomo in the morning, Signore. The bait's been laid, but it wasn't easy. His fool brother keeps changing his plans.
See, we'll need to be on hand to make sure Giuliano even gets out of bed for church tomorrow.
What is it, Jacopo? Do you think they suspect something?
Impossible! The Medici are too arrogant or too stupid to even notice. Likely a bit of both.
Do not underestimate our enemies, Francesco. Or have you already forgotten how your son was murdered?
Ooh, Francesco doesn't even react to that. Sorry Vieri, I know you're resting in pieces, but Daddy just doesn't give a shit. As with all the other assassin tombs, we exit through the gift shop. Pillaging the sarcophagus and grabbing our collectible dinner plate, we climb our ass on up out of the sewers and meet back up with La Volpe. Whatever the bad guys are planning, they're doing it at the Duomo in the middle of Sunday Mass. And the only proper response to such a shocking revelation is to get a bit of cardio in, preferably scaling some viewpoints. By the way, this is how I kind of suggest doing this. Just whenever you find yourself close to some shadowed areas of the map, take a few minutes, scale a viewpoint or two, and by the end you'll be glad you did. And since we're all tuckered out, now's probably a good time to mention the fast travel system in AC2. I think this is probably my favorite iteration of fast travel in the entire series. It's not as simple as popping into your map and selecting a location to be instantly teleported to, but it's not as annoying as not having a system to fast travel at all. And while there is a dastardly plot about to be carried out by the Medici within the next day or two, we have some time to pop back to the villa, collect our earnings, do some spelunking in the well, change up our outfit, and take a little gander inside the Auditore family crypt. At different intervals throughout the crypt, which plays exactly like the assassin tombs, we find tapestries that tell the story of one of Ezio's ancestors, detailing their travels alongside Marco Polo and Dante Alighieri. Yeah, it's a bunch of historical name drops, even Genghis Khan makes an appearance, but the tale unfolds in a fairly organic way. I guess organic as in it's being told as a memoir, so all the rough edges that come with a life lived get sanded down or just forgotten. The key points of these writings are to explore the concept of the codexes we've been collecting and their importance to the world of the assassins. It makes every new codex we find a bit more intriguing. They have me thinking about what events took place to lead me to it and it to me, how many hands it had to pass through, and how convenient that all 30 are still in one piece and easy to collect. Not the most realistic, but it doesn't bother me all that much. As for the gameplay within this crypt, we get introduced to the concept of timed puzzles, which tend to pop up in most of the platforming heavy areas to various effect. Here, they're not too bad, whereas in some areas, they can be a giant piss off. But with the depths of the Auditore crypt plunged, let's go protect Lorenzo de' Medici's luscious locks. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, this Ronnie James Dio looking motherfucker, you know if you squint a little, is Lorenzo de' Medici, a member of the Medici family who are currently in charge of Florence. The Templars are out to kill him, so we intercept them both outside Sunday Mass, foiling Francesco de' Pazzi's attempt to kill him and escorting Lorenzo through the streets of Florence. While this is an escort mission, I will say at the very least Lorenzo does hold his own, enough that I was able to actually notice how well the scale of this conflict was being put on display. We're moving from one brawl to the next, and for some we can just run right by because the guards loyal to the Medici are actually doing their goddamn jobs and fighting the attackers off. Delivering Lorenzo to his pad, we have a nice little moment where we reveal ourselves as an Auditore, and while Giovanni's reputation is noted, Lorenzo—
The Pazzi thugs are storming the Palazzo della Signoria! We cannot hold them off much longer!
Hey, shut up. Lorenzo still has one more task for us. Just a small little favor before we kick our feet up and burn one down.
Francesco de' Pazzi. Help save our city, Auditore. Kill him.
Chasing Francesco down to his evil lair, we have to climb up to the top using the corpses of his guards for a boost. All the while, he talks a bit of shit, and to be honest, I really like this. He specifically calls out that just because Ezio killed a few people doesn't make him an assassin. We're still seeing the people around Ezio point out that for as far as he's come, there's still a long road ahead. Catching up to the man of the hour, he skedaddles off the roof into a hay bale below, prompting yet another pursuit, which is good because Ezio needs a quick second to come up with a sick one-liner.
Now Firenze will judge you for what you've done.
It's over. It's all over.
Meglio essere felici in questa vita che aspirare a esserlo nella prossima. Requiescat in pace.
I love the respect he's learned to show his targets, even if in literally the next scene a stripped down Francesco is just hanging with his cock and balls out. Farewell Francesco indeed. Returning to Lorenzo, we get a codex page, we do this little 15th century no homo hug, and most importantly, get a list of even more conspirators.
Jacopo de' Pazzi, the money. This guy was the head of the Pazzi family, and he ran their banking business. An associate of Lorenzo de' Medici, he had nothing against him personally. So he hired 4 Templar hitmen to take care of the situation for him. Bernardo di Bandino Baroncelli. Brought up to hate the Medici family for the exile of his cousins, Baroncelli ran the numbers in the Pazzi Bank by day, and murdered for the Templars at night. It was Baroncelli who delivered the first blow. Stefano de Bagnone. Known for his cruelty, Bagnone was trained in Rome as a Templar butcher. It was Bagnone who stabbed Lorenzo de' Medici in the back. Antonio Maffei. Witness to the sacking of Volterra by Florentine mercenaries, Maffei blamed Lorenzo. He joined the Templars to seek revenge. It was Maffei who slashed Lorenzo's neck. Archbishop Francesco Salviati. Convinced he would be the next Archbishop of Florence, Salviati was enraged when Lorenzo stood in his way. But the Templars were there to heal his wounds. It was Salviati who marched their troops into the city.
Man, I didn't even realize how many times they hit Lorenzo. The man's a fucking unit. And while I'd like to continue thinking about his hair and shit, I've got a hankering to complete some side objectives.
I guess I gotta stop growing dope. Get a fucking job.
The first one I'm going to check out is the assassination contracts. These are accepted by visiting the various pigeon cubes scattered throughout each city. You'll usually get some vague backstory from a main character relating this killing back to the overall goal. Like here where Lorenzo says a merchant, possibly of Venice, is plotting against Florence's supply lines. Then it's as simple as locating the perpetrator, enlifing him, and bada bing bada boom, you're 1,000 florins richer. The next one is just as simple. We have to kill 3 archers, but it requires us to be a bit more tactful, taking out each archer silently and without alerting the other guards. I received a few suggestions on my AC1 video about how to make the contracts in that one play a bit easier, but here I really think the vision started in the first one is coming closer and closer to reality. We don't have guards with X-ray or 20/20 vision over 100 meters away. Instead, these missions are just a bit more forgiving and realistic. Like here, I'm supposed to kill this guard and he sees me, but because I have him hidden from the public's eye, the mission doesn't end and I can take him out without having to restart. Next up are the races. These are another carryover from AC1, but you've seen these before in a million different games. You get to a location, get told you ain't shit, and have to run through gates in a specific time limit to prove that you are shit. Wait. Next we have the courier assignments, which were introduced back in the tutorial when Giovanni asked us to deliver some letters. I didn't do too many of these because it's delivering letters, but because I like you, I'll do one more. Beat-up events are another mission type we already saw in the first game, except instead of interrogating someone, it's more mundane reasons. Like for this one, we have to locate and beat up a cheating husband. I accidentally killed the other woman, which was my bad, but I do like the dialogue we get from the husband.
I give up! That bitch! I mean, wonderful wife of mine! I'll go home!
Ezio then steps around the body of the woman we killed, the true hero of this story. Now, as cool as it is to have a variety of missions executed better than in AC1, because you make so much money through the other activities anyway, you really only have to do these if you want to experience more of the world, or the little bit of story that you get from doing them. Some of them do have continuous themes, as with the assassination contracts, but it's just nothing to write home about. Now that I've got a bit of cash in my pocket, let's head back to Monteriggioni and collect some of our extortion money. We make a stop at the art dealer as well to pick up some paintings, and also to buy a treasure map to help us scour the villa for some loose change. Generally, I'd say not to buy these too early because they really do clog up the map. They take one big Ubi shit all over the clean map UI, but in this case, I've unlocked a few more locations around the villa, so there's going to be more treasures squirreled away for me to find. After a quick run along the parapets, I'm up a few thousand florins, and I'm on my way to check out the Agent 47 barcode on the villa facade. This barcode looking thing unlocks one of 20 puzzles that will give us a snippet of a final video artifact known as the Truth. As you can see here, what I get isn't much. I'll show you this in its entirety later, but for the actual gameplay that we get to do, it's not bad. A few puzzles, some of which are borderline captchas. They're quick and easy. The hardest part of this is really just tracking down all 20 of them. And speaking of tracking things down, I think it's time to skedaddle to another assassin tomb, and while I'm at it, giving them their due. As mentioned, the assassin tombs are the optional challenge dungeons you're required to complete to unlock Alteir's armor, the strongest in the game. The earliest you can complete them all is sequence 9, but new ones come up at fairly decent intervals throughout your playthrough. The first one is the Auditore Family crypt, and although it features a few puzzle sections, this one really is the most low-key of them all. It's a walking sim crossed with an Irish car bomb. It's new and exciting for like 30 seconds before you start to regret your decisions. Alright, it's not that bad if you're interested at all in the story, it's just a slower paced lore dump. Next is the Duomo. It's very platforming heavy, but it's the shortest of all the tombs. It also probably has the best introduction to what the tombs are and what makes them fun. The painting staff of the Duomo are on lunch, and Ezio sneaks in to snack on some dead guy bones. Tasty. It's very high flying, involving a lot of chandeliers that have to be a pain in the ass to keep lit, and it's probably the most forgiving one when it comes to giving you shortcuts to get back to where you were if you fall. If you don't just die on impact, of course.
Bene. Now I have a way back up in case I fall.
Next, we have the Torre Grossa. This is the first in our list to involve guards and combat in addition to the parkouring, and I don't care for it. We're essentially meant to climb up a really tall tower, but there's so many small sections here that we can lose sight of any verticality. Instead, we're fighting more with the camera, which is banging into all the tight turns and just kind of makes me nauseous. Next is Ravaldino. I waited until 1:30 in the morning to record this, and just as I start, somebody starts screaming in my parking lot. Next is Ravaldino, and this is another one with combat mixed into the platforming segments, but it's done a lot tighter than Torre Grossa is. Each individual section feels like it has more room to breathe. There are time puzzles that, okay, well, to call them puzzles is a bit of a stretch, but they're used to separate the different areas really well. Visitazione is the tomb that balances on a knife edge of satisfying and enjoyable, or a huge pain in the dick, and it entirely depends on how the first half of the tomb goes for you. It opens with a chase sequence as you run down this guard, and while the chase isn't difficult, it does test your reflexes. And there's a huge sense of momentum here that basically ends in you being able to kill the guard or not. If you're all over the place and let him alert his buddies, then you're in for a bad time, but after dealing with them, you get part 2 of this tomb, which really takes the timed aspects of the previous tombs and bumps up the skill ceiling a little bit. Though as with the first half, if you fuck up at any point here, it's back to the beginning, and I distinctly remember this one pissing me off a bunch as a kid. San Marco is our last and greatest one in my opinion. It has 4 sections with different timed parkouring puzzles that all incorporate scale and movement in some really fun ways. After you complete each of the 4 sections, the portrait on the floor is revealed to contain an assassin crest, and that's all she wrote. And if you were really desperate for me to, here's a tier list ranking all of the assassin tombs. It's okay, I know you wanted it. Another infrequent event we can go through is a Templar Lair. Not exclusively their lairs, but certainly making sure they have a bad fucking day, as we can see here in the home invasion mission. Lorenzo invites us and the other boys from Tampa over to watch the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition Blu-rays, but when we roll up, we find the boys indisposed and Lorenzo nowhere to be seen. Not odd considering this is a big-ass residence he's got himself, so let's cut up some Templars and see where the night takes us. We move room to room, taking out guards, climbing on Lorenzo's shit, and just generally making ourselves at home. We track Lorenzo down to his treasure room, making zero effort to endear himself to the people literally shitting outside in the street.
Behold! My stuff.
But for our troubles, we get a few thousand florins, Lorenzo owes us one, again, and we head out. We visit Leonardo to drop off some codices, and he figures out that this latest one contains a blade upgrade, this time for the poison blade. This can be a great help when trying to take out some of the larger enemies, or if we just need to have a bit of a time delay between the moment we attack and when someone actually dies. This poison makes enemies go berserk, which I can only assume is due to the assload of DMT, ketamine, and opiates that Leonardo jams in it, which is honestly not a bad way to go out. He tells us we can get more poison from doctors if we run out, though I'm not sure if he's talking about medicine or 6'1" Italian goth girls. Wait, where was I going with that? Anyway, because the poison guards, or as I like to call them, victims, are freaking out, their compatriots are forced to fight back, killing our targets for us. Returning to the villa to deliver Mario the translated Codex Pages, he mentions something about them talking about a prophet and 2 pieces of Eden. Though dismissing it, we get down to business. We have a list of Jacopo's co-conspirators, and Mario sets his scouts to work tracking them down. He then takes us back to the training courtyard to teach us some more evasive combat maneuvers. And at this point is where I commend the combat for taking the next step. We're finally past the simpler techniques that were present in AC1 and are on to learn how to deal with the more elite foes, the ones that can't be countered, because they counter your counter. Here, we learn how exactly to counter their counter to our counter, with disarms and dodges. Each technique builds upon some of the previous ones we've had time to work on, and teaches us to think differently about each combat interaction, especially with the disarm ability, which we can use to take an enemy's possibly more powerful weapon, or simply render them defenseless. But before Mario can teach us more, we're informed that Jacopo's men have been tracked down in the countryside, and Ezio's on his way to tuss some cannies. The first man I track down is Stefano de Bagnone, which roughly translates to the bagel, or it will when Ezio punches a hole in him. Before we head to the abbey where he's hiding out, we receive one of my personal favorite tools, the smoke bombs. These are indispensable for some of the later missions and can be quite useful in taking out large groups of enemies. Making our way to the abbey, we have to use eagle vision to track down the imposter monk, which to be completely honest is unneeded. Just look for the dickhead surrounded by monks with swords. He's pretty distracted trying to red pill the people providing him sanctuary, so getting close to him isn't too hard. Blend in with a few of the monks, pop a smoke bomb, and bring Friar Fucknuts one step closer to touching grass, even if he's 6 feet under it. He tells tells us that Jacopo is meeting with the others under the watch of the Roman gods, whatever that means. Our next target is Francesco Salviati, who's pretty simply hiding away in a villa. This might sound like some standard AC fare, but in this mission, the game gives us a shit ton of mercenary and lets us go to town. We pretty much have an unlimited supply of bodies to throw at this problem, so it doesn't take too long to get inside. It takes even less time for Horst to come in clutch and run the bastard down. Francesco reveals that Jacopo knows we're coming for him, and that he meets with the others in darkness. Did these fuckers synchronize their mysterious clues beforehand or something? Anyway, next up we play King of the Hill with the town crier. Antonio Maffei is posted up in a tower, which in San Gimignano is actually not narrowing anything down. The town was the site of a tower raising, totally not a dick measuring contest between two families. It got so bad that the city council had to rule that no tower could exceed 52 meters, the height of the Torre Regnosa, which was the tallest tower at the time and part of the city council's palace. This meant that a few towers, once measured and found to be too high, had to be cut down so as not to violate the rule. That being said, there's more than 70 towers in San Gimignano, so which tower are we currently climbing? The mercenary we talked to says that Antonio has climbed the tallest structure, which would mean the Torre Grossa, literally the big tower. Why this one was allowed to be 54 meters, I'm not sure, but I'd love to know the answer if anybody has it. Anywho, I barely touch Antonio and he suffers a horrible accident. He pretty much just jumps on his own. There's nothing I could have done. Next up, Bernardo Baroncelli was actually arrested by Lorenzo, but escaped. So I'm keeping an eye out and got him. In my defense, he was doing a pretty piss poor job of hiding, so I'm not taking responsibility for this one. Nevertheless, it's on to our ultimate target, Jacopo. And Ezio finds him real quick, but being a smarty pants, he knows that if he follows him, he might lead us to more Templars. To Ezio, it's like a buy one get one on jugulars. I tail him all the way to the meeting place, and okay, what exactly is the plan here? How does Ezio think he's gonna hide? The mysterious Spaniard takes out Jacopo for us, ending the Pozzies for being largely incompetent and being not an idiot. He knows we'd be watching, but how he actually spotted Ezio, I'll be forever pondering.
I know you're only doing as you're told, so if you release me, I will spare your lives.
Ha! Listen to this one! Ah!
I make quick work of the guards and run in to end Jacopo's suffering. Returning to Florence, we find the year is 1480 and the events of tying up loose ends have been taking place over the last 2 years. We return to Lorenzo and deliver him the good news, which prompts him to provide us with a gift, the Medici cape. We can wear this garb in Medici territory and remain incognito as it identifies you as a friend of the family. However, doing anything dubious or illegal will still draw the ire of guards. We stop by Leonardo's to show off the new fit, when a kindly signore lets us know that Leonardo was commissioned by a Venetian noble to paint some portraits. Our boy and his toys are in another castle, so we're hitting the road for Venice. And how convenient, we happen to run into the man of the hour in a bit of cart trouble. So Ezio maxes out his block pole while Leonardo fixes the wheel, which lets Ezio get a little peek at what's inside the cart, none other than one of Leonardo's flying machines. That'll have to wait though, because we're being pursued by the Spaniards' men. Cue the Tokyo Drift gameplay segment. It's pretty simple. Enemies are going to jump onto your cart and you have to use your environment to knock them off, while also avoiding some obstacles. Ezio then jumps off, and there's a brief combat segment before we continue on foot into Forli. Here, we're meant to take a ferry into Venice, but because we don't have a pass, we have to come up with some way of obtaining one. Now, I'm no expert, but I suspect the game is going to point me in the right direction. Could it be this woman screaming for help on a rock? How did she even get out here? So we find a gondola and row our boat over to the screaming woman, who we find out is Caterina Sforza. Which is odd. You'd think someone so powerful would have people lining up to save her, but she does have a bit of a mouth on her, so maybe they left her out there to starve. Regardless, she mommy-doms this guy into letting us board the ship for Venice.
Be careful, Ezio. Do you know who that was?
My next conquest.
I don't think so, Ezio. That's Caterina Sforza, daughter of the Duca di Milano. Her husband is...
Husband?
Si, her husband is the Lord of Forli. That woman is as powerful and dangerous as she is young and beautiful.
Sempre come una donna per me.
It's arrivederci for now, but not before getting yanked out of the Animus to go outside for a bit. Apparently staying in the Animus too long can have some unfortunate side effects, hence why everyone is always going on about this Subject 16. So Lucy has us go through a little skill test to see how much we've picked up from the Animus. This is the positive side of the bleeding effect, that thing that will eventually cause us to go crazy if we're in there too long. We can basically matrix download all of the skills of Ezio into our brain in just a couple of days in the Animus. There's a little bit of exposition here, but it's nothing nothing we don't already know. Back to the Animus, and oh shit, I thought those mushrooms were duds. We find ourselves playing as Alteir once again, but this isn't great because we're not in the Animus. Desmond chalks it up to not sleeping much and assumes he passed out, all the while chasing a woman across some rooftops. Once we catch up to her, we find out this is Maria, the Templar who Alteir spared when he went to Acre to assassinate Robert de Saab. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, maybe you go check out my video on the first game. So anyway, they get down to crusading, and I have to wonder, did Desmond just have to sit there and watch? I bet he did too. Even weirder, after they're done rolling around in the hay, Alteir pieces out, but we stay with Maria. The implication being she was impregnated, and this is the next in Desmond's line of ancestors. This had better turn out to be relevant to the story and not just some weird way for the writers to work in their kinks. Okay, now back to the Animus. It's now 1481, a year later, a year older. Ezio is now 21 for anyone trying to keep track at home. We're finally in Serenissima Repubblica di Venezia. So let's take a tour of the town and see what's what. We see the Rialto, which at this point in time is just a big wooden bridge, which immediately gives the city a certain charm, because after our guide points out the bridge, he then immediately brings us to the oldest church in Venice, the San Giacomo de Rialto. These are two of Venice's most famous landmarks, one of which at this point in time is new and exciting, juxtaposed by the second, which is considered old even then. It's moments like this that remind me just how old and storied cities outside North America can be. Our tour guide next takes us to the markets, where we see some shit go down.
No other city can match the size of Venezia's markets, be it spices or silk, from near and far. There is...
You were told to stay home! But the rent is paid! I have every right to sell here! Emilio disagrees! No, stop!
Let us continue the tour elsewhere.
The Emilio the guards mention is Emilio Barbarigo, and we watch the merchant go to complain before getting disappeared by Emilio's guards.
What are you doing?
You're under arrest for disrupting commerce.
What? You just invented that! There's no such law!
There is now!
No! Stop!
Man, the city is nice, but this tour is a downer. You can bet your ass that this will be going in the TripAdvisor review. Not to mention the masses of streetwalkers, apparently led by Alice from Twilight, running through the streets and trying to steal our hard-earned blood money. Finally getting to Leonardo's workshop, we split up here so Ezio can go beat down Emilio's door, but not before I miss this QTE to give Leonardo a hug. It doesn't do anything story-wise, but look at that face. The man is devastated. While scoping out Emilio's digs, Ezio works out a plan to infiltrate, but comes up short because he won't be able to scale the facade. Luckily, we're interrupted by a group of thieves running past us. They distract the guards, while the local manic pixie dream girl who bumped into us earlier manages to climb the building with ease, only to literally take an arrow to the knee, running to Ezio for help. And it's a good thing the closest bystander to this whole situation is a future master assassin wearing plot armor that's so dense he has to call in thick to work. What follows is an escort mission that actually has some really nice progression and flow to it. The woman tells us her name is Rosa, and we start out with her completely outrunning us, even with an arrow in her leg, while we fight off guards along the way. Eventually, she slows down and then collapses, unable to run anymore. We carry her while our Thieves Guild buddies fight the guards for us, before dropping her off in a gondola and taking out archers lining the boat's route. Finally, we arrive at the Thieves Guild where they can tend to Rosa. Here, we're introduced to Antonio, leader of the Thieves Guild in Venice, who, of course, already knows all about us and the work we do. I wonder why. Meeting with Antonio in his office, we're offered some coffee, or I guess telekinetically handed some coffee, where Ezio hits him with the "can I have cream and sugar" to go with it. Antonio tells him to take his double-double and go double fuck himself before getting down to business. We find a game of 40k going on Antonio's desk, a perfect recreation of the palazzo and the surrounding buildings. It seems the Thieves Guild is keen to infiltrate Emilio's palace, but the events of today have set them back considerably. Antonio suggests that they wait it out, draw new plans, and rebuild their forces, with Ezio's help. Not one to sit on his ass, he agrees. So starts a series of missions that feel like they only take 5 weeks, when in fact they take 5 years chronologically. I believe the devs did this to have deaths and events in the game line up with their real-life counterparts, and just explained it very, very poorly by, not explaining it. In the book, we get to see that some of this is intentional on Ezio's part, taking time to slowly hunt Emilio down and rebuild the Thieves Guild into essentially the Venice Assassins Bureau. As always, I'll continue to point out any major time jumps that the game neglects to. Our first task is to meet up with Rosa again and have her teach us how to climb the way she does. Her leg is still mangled, but our buddy Franco here can demonstrate for us. Also, perhaps the most important point brought up in the book and not in the game is that Ezio gets really jealous that this kid can climb the way he can, and how he's super handsome and shit, but Rosa assures him that Franco is gay. Just thought you might want to know. Anyway, Ezio gets it pretty quick. All it is making a jump while hanging, and so Rosa challenges us to climb this big ass building and gives us 5 minutes to do it. We also free some captive thieves, steal the outfits of a few of Emilio's archers, kill some traitors, and suddenly it's 1485. Suddenly, we're inside the palazzo. Then we're killing Emilio. Suddenly. Well, that was easy, and all it took was Ezio skipping his early 20s. Before we killed Emilio, he was talking with a fellow conspirator, a man by the name of Carlo Grimaldi, a man who just so happens to be meeting with the Spaniard and the rest of the Templars, who are planning to kill the Doge and replace him with one of their own people tonight. And to be honest, all of this feels like it's moving a little too fast. Don't we want to wait until Ezio is staring down the barrel of 40, sending ironic memes to his coworkers and treating himself to the Costco special? Well, if you insist. We return to the Thieves Guild with news, and Antonio pledges all of his resources to help Ezio, most importantly his time, which kicks off a pretty fantastic mission that I wish we saw more of. Because we need to get inside such a fortified building, Antonio walks with us to the location and helps us assess the exterior, looking for some sort of a way inside. I love that we're doing the actual groundwork of a mission, something that is actually missing in AC2 that we did in the first game. In that one, before you killed anyone, you had to do some detective work. You had to figure out where your target will be, how you'll get to them, and how you'll escape. And despite killing way more people, this pretty much never happens in AC2. Sure, you undertake tasks that will help you get close to your targets, like when we stole the archers' outfits to impersonate Emilio's guards, but we didn't uncover that. We didn't go out of our way to figure that out. Ezio was just told to do it, and we did. But while we have this rare opportunity, I'm gonna savor it. We get to the Doge's Basilica and go through the list of options available to us. First, we check the gates, which are too heavily guarded to get through. Next, we climb a bell tower with Antonio to scout the rooftops, which we discover are too sheer to climb, and the courtyard is barred off with a fence even on the roof. They decide there's no way in, but not before.
I need your help, Leonardo. Does it work?
What? What are you asking?
Does it work, Leonardo? Can it really fly?
I don't know. It's only a prototype, an idea. It's not ready yet.
Have you tried it?
No, it's too dangerous. To test it, you'd have to leap off a tower. Who would be mad enough to do a thing like that?
Leonardo, I think you just found your madman.
So, yeah, we cut to a tower where they've built a launch pad for Ezio to throw himself off of to test Leonardo's machine, and although it keeps to the air for a while, it's nothing more than a glider, and it isn't going to take us anywhere close to the Basilica. We get back to Leonardo's workshop. He has a bit of a moment where he notices that the papers he tossed in the fire are rising due to the heat. He concludes that we can make it to the Basilica in the glider, we just need to construct a series of fires along the route that allow us to catch the draft upwards. And after a brief gameplay montage where we clear the rooftops of archers, our thief accomplices build us a series of fires, and we are back on track. Unfortunately, that track leads us right to the scene of one poisoned Doge.
Stop! Signore, don't drink that!
You are too late. The Doge is dead.
What? Carlo?
Apologies, Signore. But you should have listened to me when you had the chance. Seems you have failed, assassin.
Forgive me, Signore. I tried.
Why? What was it all for?
With Carlo running away just in time to accuse us of the crime. We can't save the Doge, but we can unalive one Grimaldi. With another member of the conspiracy dead, we experience another time jump, this time bringing us to 1486. We meet up with Leonardo, all beat up about failing our mission to save the Doge, and he's like, bro, it's Carnival. You can hide your face and we can get hammered. But Ezio, already having his own plans, is all like, sorry bro, I can't, I'm super busy. By the way, do you have a mask I can borrow? And here's some more codexes. The codexes, we find out, contain a gun attachment for the hidden blade, which, sure, why not? Leonardo gives us this new blade attachment along with some piping hot exposition. Marco Barbarigo is the new Doge. Ezio needs to go see Antonio, and we learn someone named Sister Teodora is involved.
Sister?
Well, in a way, yes, sister.
It's unclear if she does anything or just sits in a chair and watches, but deciding that's a question to ponder some other time, we take Leonardo's eyes wide shut mask, pat him on the tush, and we're out the door to paint Venezia red.
Marco Barbarigo. Although his brother Agostino was destined for greatness, Marco left his mark on Venetian history as well. A tyrant since he was barely old enough to walk. Whatever Marco wanted, he got. There are records here for jewels, entire fleets of ships, all paid for by his family and all ordered directly from him. And then there's his personal life. Apparently, Marco's wife, Carlotta, used to be married to his bodyguard, Dante Moro. Dante was captain of the city guard, and heir to one of the most prestigious families in Venezia. Marco was supposedly his close friend, right? But get this, Marco decides he wants Carlotta. In the Catholic religion, marriage is till death do us part, and Marco's a good Catholic. So, he hires a hit on Dante. Dante gets stabbed 3 times in the body, and once in the head. But he doesn't die. He recovers with severe brain damage. Dante becomes like a child. So, what does Marco do? Well, he hires Dante as his personal bodyguard, and he gets him to sign a confession annulling the marriage. Marco takes Carlotta, and keeps Dante as his personal slave. What a lovely fella.
Arriving at the sisters' place, we find Antonio in what modern scholars would call a Venetian panini. Sister Teodora is indeed watching.
I never imagined you as a religious type.
It depends how you understand religion, my son. It's not just men's souls that call for soothing.
She hits us with a loose interpretation of Catholicism, and before we get to find out what layer of that sandwich we're gonna be, someone stabs one of the courtesans in front of what is quite literally the worst person this side of the Mediterranean to do so. After testing out our new firearm attachment, we return to the sister, who doesn't seem too cut up about the arterial spray, no doubt soaking her counter, and joins us in our little brainstorming sesh. Antonio doesn't see the point in trying to take out the new Doge. They've done this before, and it was ultimately pointless. Plus, he's a bit of a hermit. Fortunately, the Doge is a hermit that parties, and he throws one banger of a carnival party. However, to gain entry, Ezio would need a golden mask, one that is impossible to get, except for literally right now within the next 20 minutes. How fortunate. To win the mask, we have to complete a series of challenges that, although innocent and fun, coincidentally use a lot of assassin-y skills. So this will be a piece of cake. The first one is pretty easy. Every lady in the district has been given a ribbon. We have to collect as many as possible by pickpocketing them. From the sounds of it, our boy Ezio might have stopped a few hearts, and not in the way he usually does.
Have anything for me, Bellini?
The next one is a race. Simple enough, and we get some banging tunes while we complete it. Now that we've won 2 out of 4 challenges, the babushka and his cuck friend aren't looking too pleased. Challenge 3 is a capture the flag one, basically just a best 2 out of 3 race against a Templar sprinter. It's really not too hard. Our final challenge is the Chris Benoit simulator, except instead of chair shots, it's repeated bare-fisted strikes to the dome. Our friends of course can't let this stand, and they couldn't just arrest or kill him without doing it in a convoluted way, so they send Dante into the ring. That's right, the man who got accidentally lobotomized by the guy banging his ex-wife and is described to have the mind of a literal child, has been sent into the ring against a man whose sole purpose for the past decade has been to unalive every member of the secret society this dude is a part of. The front line in the war against the assassins is being single-handedly enforced by this guy. This goes about as well as you'd expect, so they send in 4 of the meanest looking 110-pound men I've ever seen. I mean, for fuck's sakes, just shoot the guy. Anyway, 4 men enter the arena, and 4 slit throats later, which by the way, no one even acknowledges. After all that, our after-school special ends exactly the way it would based on the logic of this world. They just pay the guy to declare Dante the winner. Fuck. Back at Teodora's place, Ezio is carving a trench in the floor, getting berated by Antonio, who's spitting straight facts.
Sorry, Ezio. We could not have known Silvio would cheat as he did.
You should have.
But luckily, Dante has been spotted with the mask on his way to the party. Knowing if you kill him, they'll cancel the party, Ezio is convinced to steal the mask instead. I'd argue if you hit his body, it would take them longer to figure out that he was killed. Definitely longer than the time it would take for him to run back and tell them the mask is gone, but what do I know? Only 7% of my viewers are subscribed.
12 seconds later.
The mask has been lifted, the party infiltrated, and look who showed up to complicate things. Fortunately, I have magic from the Far East that lets me pop Dumbledore like this is Dealey Plaza. Piecing out of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, we get back to the sister's place, and she hooks Ezio up with a 5-some.
Girls.
You know, those girls sound really pleased, but they're not going to be happy when they get that armor off and realize he hasn't changed clothes in 2 years. we pick back up with Ezio chilling on the Rialto, just hanging out a few meters over a cesspool of human waste and garbage when a messenger lets us know that Antonio wants a word. We're introduced to Marco's brother, Agostino Barbarigo. He minces no words in denouncing his brother as a puppet for the Borgia, the large political family that the Spaniard is a part of. Later, we discuss the location of Silvio, where we find out he's holed up with an army of mercenaries. The solution? To raise an army of our own, and Antonio knows just the man for the job, a man by the name of Bartolomeo. Unfortunately, Silvio anticipated this, ambushing Bartolomeo and his men and imprisoning them further in the district. Also, just a funny thing I noticed, after this guy tells us what happened, he dies, but because this guy's pupils are clipping through his eyelids, he just looks even more fucked up than if Ezio had just left him alone. Locating our man, we take out his captors and spring the man, the myth, the legend, Bartolomeo.
About goddamn time! I don't know if I should kiss you or slap you. Maybe both, just to be safe.
That's quite alright.
Who are you?
I'm Ezio Auditore da Firenze. I'm here to rescue you.
Let's see who winds up rescuing who.
This man is to be feared, respected, and I dare say thirsted after. This is a guy who loves to fight for fight's sake and doesn't take shit from anyone. While we work our way through the guards, he can't help but delighting, until his glee is cut short when we enter his home and Bartolomeo desperately begins searching for his beloved Bianca.
Look at this place! And poor Bianca. If something's happened to her... Aha! Oh, my darling. Thank God you're all right.
Fortunately, this story has a happy ending, and he finds her safe and sound. Our boy is ready and willing to help us take the fight to Silvio, but only after we rescue his men that were captured. It's no different than the task we undertook for the Thieves Guild a little earlier, and it's followed up with another run here because I said so, do nothing, then run to the next marker because I also said so sort of mission. Anyway, Bartolomeo's idea is to start essentially utter chaos in key different areas, so Silvio will have to send more and more guards out to quell the uprisings, draining him of mercenaries and leaving a less defended Silvio for Ezio to close in on. After signaling for the mercenaries to begin rioting, we follow Bartolomeo into battle, where we get some of the best combat dialogue I've ever heard. Anyway, we now have to assassinate Dante and Silvio. Now these are both men who we stood less than pissing distance away from not one chapter ago, but again, what do I know? Fighting our way to their ship and totally not cheesing them with smoke bombs, we find out that these little death vignettes can be a party for 3. Dante informs us that they were only the distraction and that the rest of the conspirators are sailing for Cyprus. They never intended to replace Marco as the Doge. They had other plans in mind. The next sequence finds us jumping to 2 years later, to Ezio's birthday in fact. We find him ruminating on the past 10 years with Rosa, explaining he knows he's close to the end, but just can't see what it was all for. I've mentioned these skips in time a few times now, and I think playing this game now, it might be easy to take for granted just how slow everything was back then. Just traveling time alone was weeks, months, and even years. But with that being said, we still see Ezio questioning how he spends his time. It humanizes him and makes him more relatable. We see Ezio in these grand, important convergences of right time, right place, but what about how he spends the other 364 days of the year? Waking up, training, interacting with the world. We see a little bit of that, but a lot more than I think we see in other media, and I'm glad the writers are making small considerations for big nerds like me. Anyway, back in 1488, Rosa gives Ezio his birthday present, the shipping manifest from the day the ship left for Cyprus 2 years ago, and the information that it's due to return tomorrow. But of course, before Ezio can address some tension between Rosa and himself, Leonardo strolls up having just got back into town. Taking a stroll around the block, Leonardo lets us in on some intriguing revelations.
We've known each other a long time, Leonardo. If I can't trust you, there is nobody. My uncle Mario spoke of it long ago. A prophecy hidden in the Codex, leading to an ancient vault that holds something very powerful.
Grandioso. But if you took these pages from the Barbarigo, then maybe they know about this vault too. That's not good.
Wait. What if that's why they sent the ship to Cyprus? To find this piece of Eden and bring it back to Venezia?
When the second piece is brought to the floating city,
the prophet will appear. Only the prophet can open the vault. My God! When my uncle told me about the Codex, I was too young, too brash to imagine it was anything but an old man's fantasy. But now I see. The killing of Mocenigo. Even the Medici, my father and brothers. It was all part of his plan. To find the vault. The Spaniard.
Rodrigo Borgia.
The boat from Cyprus arrives tomorrow. I plan to be there to meet it.
Good luck, my friend.
Arriving at the port the morning the ship from Cyprus returns, we can see a Templar courier taking the cargo with Uncle Mario watching from the shadows, completely unaware we're here. Interesting. Taking his chance, Ezio decides to infiltrate the group and take the place of the courier. Making our way to the Spaniard, we pull some cinematic moves and Ezio drops some truth bombs. They're all alone, there is no prophet, and Rodrigo is full of shit. Believing himself to be the prophet, the Borgia pulls a have at thee and we start a boss fight of sorts. And it fucking drags. The man takes hit after hit and just doesn't go down. Eventually, when you do get in enough damage, he asks Ezio where the rest of his people are. Ezio still doesn't realize he's not the last Skywalker, and so the Borgia calls in some guards to help finish us off. Fortunately, that's when Mario shows up, bringing along the rest of the Avengers. Volpe, Antonio, Bartolomeo, all our pals show up to help us finish off the Spaniard, and good thing too because a bunch of tanks just walked in. It doesn't take us long to kill them off, but because Rodrigo's health just goes back to 100, it's just all 5 of us standing around him taking turns getting hits in, and it totally detracts from how cool I think this moment was supposed to be. But of course, all it takes is a quick kick from the son of a bitch to knock us down, letting him escape. None of the other assassins are apparently in sight to stop him, though Paola comes out of nowhere, along with all the remaining folks that have helped us so far.
Theodora! What are you all doing here?
Perhaps the same thing you are, Ezio. Hoping to see the prophet appear.
I came here to kill the Spaniard. I couldn't care less about your prophet. He never showed up.
No? But you did.
What?
A prophet's arrival was foretold. And unbeknownst to us, here you are. Perhaps all along, you were the one we sought.
Cosa? Who are you?
Niccolò di Bernardo de Machiavelli. I am an assassin, trained in the ancient ways to safeguard mankind's evolution. Just like you, and each one of us here.
Okay, so maybe hold the phone. All of these people are assassins and have been secretly training Ezio for a decade now to eventually become one of them, but they just thought it now pertinent to tell him. He's been the single driving force against the Templars with their help, but he's still the one that's been making it all happen. The reveal, I guess, is that they believe Ezio to be the prophet because none of them expected him to show up. It kinda makes sense, but they didn't expect him to show up because nobody told him. I don't know, we're on some real shaky ground here, and if I pull too many threads, this whole thing is going to come apart. We meet up with the rest of the assassins and undergo the initiation rites. Ezio recites the creed, gets his ring finger branded, and all of the assassins leap of faith their way right into the history books. That's the end of this sequence, but before we can move on to the next one, it's time for a bit of fourth wall breaking context. See, when AC2 came out, there were only 12 sequences, and as you'll notice, we just finished sequence 11. If we played this when it first came out, we would be jumping to the final sequence 11 years later in 1499. Now, 11 years is a long time. The book covers some of those years, likely because it was following the narrative before content was cut, but even then, only barely. So what Ubisoft did after the release was put out 2 pieces of DLC content, the missing sequence 12 and 13 that were initially cut. This is going to be important, as there are some slight jumps that don't make a whole lot of sense, and the game doesn't go out of its way to show us how much time has passed. But I put my men on the case. Top men. And some bottoms too, and I'm going to do my best to fill in the gaps with as much info as I can. For sequence 12 in 1488, we start at Leonardo's workshop where we find him examining the Apple of Eden. Ezio gives it a little tap, showing everyone the secrets of the universe, no big deal, and they decide to take the apple to Forli where it will be hidden with surprise late game reveal assassin Caterina Sforza. Not that anyone saw that coming. The first piece of DLC / imposter sequence takes us to Forli. We meet up with Caterina outside Forli where she catches us up. She now rules the city-state after having her husband killed for conspiring with the Templars. And maybe just a little bit because he was boring in bed? I don't know, her reasons are her own. As we get closer to the city, we find some people fleeing, and we're informed that the Orsi brothers have taken control of the city. These are the same men that Caterina hired to kill her husband, only they're now bankrolled by the Borgia. They're after a map that the late however you say this guy's name, was drying up, showing the locations of some Codex pages for Rodrigo. But that's gonna have to wait, because Caterina's children are still in the city, and we gotta show her that we're more than just long, tan, and handsome. We fight our way to the city gates, and finding they're already shut, we decide to row around to the back to a secret tunnel while Caterina distracts the guards at the gate. You know, the usual stuff, telling them she's gonna cut their heads off, she's gonna piss down their necks, and yeah. Infiltrating the city, we open the gates, do some brawling, and locate most of Caterina's kids. 2 are still missing, but for now we have to stop some reinforcements from getting inside. After repelling the attack, the Orsi brothers show up, ransoming the kids for the map and the apple. Caterina isn't having any of it, and just watch this interaction.
Where are my children? Let them go!
Of course, Signora. We'll happily give them back for something of yours. A certain map.
And a certain apple, brother.
See, a certain apple indeed. Or shall I slice your baby's necks ear to ear?
Bastardi! You think you can threaten me? I'll give you nothing! You want my children? Take them! I have the instrument to make more!
Bruh. This dude's face, his fucking, oh my god, I lost my mind. If this was ever made into a movie, I need Nick Kroll to play both of them. Just Winklevoss style. Of course, as they're leaving, they tell us exactly where the kids are being held, so let's hit the road. Finding her daughter, Bianca, she's just cursing these dudes out.
Is this all the men you have to hold me? Salty. It won't be enough. My mama is fierce. We Sforza women are no wilting flowers. You pretty to the eye, but the eyes deceive.
And they must be getting pissed because the countdown to her apparent execution starts a race to save her, Sforza Horizon style. Saving her, she lets us know that her brother is being kept at the lighthouse. This goes about as well as you'd expect. We kill one of the brothers and make our way back to the city. Unfortunately, their goal was to lure Ezio away, allowing the remaining forces to attack and steal the apple. The remaining brother, Cecco, has retreated into the mountains. I mean, sure, Ezio is just one dude and you have an entire army in there to defend the city, but I guess even that wasn't enough. Finding him isn't too hard, and Ezio just, he stabs him so slow, it's excruciating. I guess that's excruciating too, but this is Ezio Auditore.
Don't. Who are you? Stop. Don't open it.
Seasons change, time passes by. As the weeks become the months, become the years.
So he sleeps off getting gut stabbed, grows a sick-ass beard, and heads out to find the monk that stole the apple from him. Starting our search at an abbey outside Forli, we're on the hunt for a monk with a missing finger, which surprisingly doesn't narrow it down.
A monk in black robes who lacks one of his 10 fingers.
Well, Brother Guido has only 9 toes. You sure it wasn't a toe?
Quite sure.
And then there's Brother Domenico, but it's his entire left arm he's lacking.
Again, quite sure it was a finger.
Now wait a moment. I do recall a black-robed monk with 9 fingers. Yes, of course.
We scare the absolute shit out of some monks and tackle one that gives us the name of the man we're looking for, Savonarola. Ezio then hits him with a dog the bounty hunter.
Thank you. Go with God, brother.
So no harm, no foul. What we find out is that Savonarola studied in Florence, which means that we're finally heading back home. Eventually. I hope you're not desperate for the answer to that mystery, because we're taking a little detour, leaving Forli in 1488 for Venice in 1491. Why? Well, remember how I mentioned there was a book that filled in some of the story gaps? Well, there was also a companion game released on the DS, optimized for the DSi, that actually covers a small portion of this massive time skip. But look, this is an older game on an older console, so for me to find some way to play and review this game inside of this review just so I could cover the bare bones amount of story included,
it would be fucking crazy.
Anyway, Released on November 17th, 2009 for the Nintendo DS and on iOS on January 7th, 2010, Discovery, also known by its Christian name Assassin's Creed II Discovery, was developed by handheld and mobile game developer Kryptonite Games. Kryptonite was acquired by mobile developer Glue in 2011, a game you might know from the casual free-to-play role-playing game known as Kim Kardashian Hollywood. Glue would go on to be acquired by Actual Satan, EA, in April 2021. The writer behind Discovery, Darby McDevitt, would go on to join Ubisoft as a lead writer on Revelations, Black Flag, and Valhalla, the latter of which he would serve as narrative director for. We'll get into the story in a sec, but first I want to cover the gameplay. Discovery is a 2.5D side-scroller, where we take control of a very low-res Ezio Auditore, fighting through Italy and Spain. If you've played a side-scroller before, the combat will look fairly standard. We have timed button actions to do things like counter and deflect, we can roll, dodge, and run away from enemies, which run the gamut from annoying watcher types, tanky captains, and archers that would shoot straight up in the air if they could. Some staple Assassin's Creed isms make an appearance. You of course have the hidden blade, which can be used to silently dispatch enemies from hiding places like hay bales, or from fucking 8 feet away apparently. Oh, and since I know you DSi stands are vibrating in your seat waiting for me to mention it, the DSi optimization part basically just allows you to take a picture of yourself with the DSi's built-in camera, which will put your nightmare-looking image on a wanted poster for you to tear down. Remember? Because Ezio does that in the real Assassin's Creed 2. Anyway, these will lead to a completeness rating, which will give you Animus bucks to unlock cheats, which the game calls Animus hacks. These are a pretty cute in-universe addition to explain the ways that these cheats mix up the gameplay. They range from different outfits to making climbing faster, or just making guards never see you. The only downside to these is you can only have one turned on at a time, probably because a good amount of them increase general gameplay speed by running or climbing faster, and your DS would turn into a steamy brick if it had to run at that speed. Speaking of which, the performance overall feels pretty solid. If Ezio gets into a good sprint, sometimes you can see frames committing suicide, but these slowdowns are temporary. To my recollection, I didn't experience any glitches or anything, and my overall experience was positive, even if the gameplay sections, generally combat, felt a little boring. Where the gameplay of Discovery really separates itself from other generic side-scrollers, it's in the movement and free-running system. Almost anything you see is climbable, and usually every level will have a defined upper and lower route. Upper containing more collectibles and enemies like watchers and archers, and the lower ones containing more captains and hiding places. It's no secret that the game wants you to stick to the rooftops where possible, almost certainly because this is where the speed and fluidity of the game really shines. Ezio can climb, clamber, swing from poles, build up speed, and launch himself through the air to cover large distances. He's basically a more lethal Sonic the Hedgehog. However, unlike Sonic, which feels like you can better view and anticipate obstacles that are coming up to better direct your gameplay, Discovery feels a bit more claustrophobic. Besides the general normal levels, there are two specialty flavors that change the gameplay requirements and pacing, those being chase missions and stealth missions. Chase missions generally involve trying to outrun a wall of arrows creeping closer and closer, and tend to be used as a way for the developer to reuse the level you just completed by having you run back the way you came. This works way better than it might sound, generally because you don't feel as bored as you would if you had to backtrack normally. The stealth missions are exactly what they sound like. More controlled movement is required, striking from the shadows, and hiding to avoid enemy watchers. You do get a 3-strike system, so it's not like if you're seen once you have to start from the beginning, which would have made them feel a lot more tedious. They're aided by the inclusion of the second screen, which is where the map lives, although it does show you a slightly farther range than we see on the top screen, which is good. It's doing what a map and motion tracker should do. Anyway, now that we've gone over gameplay with as much detail as I'd really care to, let's jump into the real reason for this game's inclusion here, the story. In 1491, Ezio returns to Venice at the behest of Antonio, who wants to hook him up with a freelance gig, working for Luis de Sant'Agno. Luis asks Ezio to help keep someone named Christophe safe, as he plans to meet with Rodrigo Borgia. Christophe is seeking someone to help bankroll his expedition to the New World, and if you haven't figured it out yet, this is Christopher Columbus. Ezio agrees, hoping that the arrangement will help him get closer to the Spaniard. However, tailing Christophe to his supposed meeting with the Borgia, Ezio finds that Luis's suspicions were correct, and it was all a ruse to murder the lad. Ezio rescues him, and returning to Luis, he's pretty adamant that he isn't a fucking babysitter and that he's got more important stuff to do, but they convince him to run back to their hostel to recover an atlas containing maps that chart a western route to the Orient. Yeah, remember, this is a mobile tie-in game at the end of the day, so don't be surprised by shaky character motivations like this. I'm sure there's a cut mission somewhere where Ezio has to find the glass glass tube Columbus used to shove up his ass, which by some leap in logic is meant to be the invention of the telescope or something. I don't know, all I'm saying is you know the rules and so do I. Returning the Atlas to Luis and Christophe, they ship out, but not before Luis lets Ezio know that the Brotherhood in Spain has been all but destroyed, with the Inquisitors locking up and murdering assassins on the orders of Tomas Torquemada. Ezio returns to Antonio, declaring his quest for the apple has been put on hold so he can rebuild the Brotherhood in Spain. Setting out for Barcelona, Ezio locates the Thieves Guild hideout but finds it empty, of assassins that is. He's ambushed and flees into the sewers to avoid the guards. This must be a classic assassin move we haven't heard of yet, because here he runs into another member of the Brotherhood who's also in hiding, Rafael Sanchez. Rafael gives us the name of the man leading the arrests, Gaspar Martinez. Gaspar seems to not actually be aware he was hunting assassins, but naturally this doesn't really matter and Ezio assassinates him, pulling a list of names off his body and leaving to Zaragoza to save some more captured assassins. Ezio succeeds almost perfectly, managing to save 5 out of the 6 assassins named on the list. The 6th unlucky guy was killed by Pedro Llorente and Torquemada, dumping a hot steaming pile of exposition for us, saying that the Inquisition is a means to exterminate the assassins, and that the orders came right from Rodrigo Borgia himself. Catching up with Pedro, he doesn't really give us anything, so Ezio assassinates him and returns to Rafael, who reveals that he's secretly embedded in the monarchy and serves as a treasurer to Queen Isabella. Ezio thinks that's cool and all, but insists that he did what he came here to do and wants to go, but Rafael insists he came with him to Granada to further uncover the Templar conspiracy. I love how much of this game so far has just been Ezio really not wanting to do things.
I have freed those I came to rescue. I should be returning to Italia.
Ezio, I beg you to stay and help me. We're on the fringe of a grand Templar scheme.
In Granada, Ezio is dispatched to take out some of the roaming guards to shore up some tensions and make the town safer for civilians. After this is done, Ezio runs into Luis again, who reveals he is also an assassin and is also a member of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand's court. Raphael joins us, and the two reveal that a Templar spy has been passing false information back to King Muhammad XII in order to keep the fight going. So Ezio is to find the secret passage being used by the spy and then kill him. We discover the idea behind the Templars wishing to continue the war in Granada is to keep the Spanish monarchy's money tied up so they can't provide Christopher Columbus with the funding he needs to set sail for the New World, allowing the Templars to mount their own expedition first. The two go on to explain that King Muhammad was a friend to the assassins up until a few months ago when they stopped hearing from him. Ezio's next task is to infiltrate the besieged Alhambra fortress and find out what happened to the king, which he does pretty easily. He's been a prisoner of the Templars for months, who are indeed keeping him prisoner to bleed the Spanish of funds for the war. The king agrees to abdicate and Ezio opens the palace gates, allowing Spanish soldiers to enter Alhambra. Of course, now that peace talks are in progress, Christophe immediately wants to ask the queen for money, which Luis warns him against. Christophe storms off, saying he's been waiting 6 years for the queen to hear his request, and it might soon be time to hear other offers. In the meantime, the Templars have shifted their focus from prolonging the war to sowing chaos and pushing Queen Isabella to unite Spain under one faith. To make this decision easier for her, Torquemada orders another inquisitor, Juan de Murillo, to round up and execute anyone who doesn't follow the Pope. No sooner do we learn the man's name before Ezio is sticking a blade in his neck. Finally, we meet with Queen Isabella and Ezio pleads with her to give Christophe the money he needs, but she says money is still scarce and he is left for Paris to entertain an offer from King Charles anyway. Sensing a trap, Luis sends Ezio, yeah, you know the routine by now. Ezio intercepts Christophe, returns him to the queen, who has agreed to give him the money he needs to set sail, and Torquemada is pissed at Luis and Raphael for their meddling and has dispatched inquisitors to kill them. Ezio spoils that plan pretty quick and finds Luis and Raphael have had a change of heart. Torquemada is back on the menu and Ezio is hungry. Finally confronting the bastard face to face, we get a fairly succinct showdown. Unfortunately, Torquemada got away, but it's agreed that he seems to be less of a Templar and more of a deluded sycophant. Yeah, I know, difference without a distinction, but their original thought still stands. Killing Torquemada would probably have added more fuel to the fire of the Inquisition. Alright, back to the main game, and in case you forgot where we were or what's going on since it's been 9 years, welcome to 1497 Florence. We're looking for Savonarola, the monk who stole the apple from us. Besides the previous tangent, we chalk a lot of this waiting in between to the fact that digging up info on his various enemies takes time. Real quick though, before we enter the city, let's put on our Medici cape and... that's not good. We meet up with Machiavelli, and he fills us in on the state of things. However, the book contains a few details that are glossed over by the game or not mentioned at all. For one, Lorenzo is dead. He died in-game and in real life in 1492, which led to a period of instability in Florence because his family would have starred in a TLC original. This is what allowed Savonarola to gain a foothold in the city. The other is that Cristina, Ezio's flame from his youth, was murdered by Savonarola's men. This is revealed retrospectively in AC Brotherhood, but seeing as it happens now, I might as well tell you now. Back in the game, Machiavelli explains that Savonarola didn't use the apple to control the masses, but rather the politicians and community leaders that influenced them. As you can expect, this doesn't go over well with the Borgia, not that Savonarola cares. As Machiavelli explains, Rodrigo keeps sending men, and Savonarola keeps sending them back in pieces. If the Borgia knows the apple is here, that puts a bit of pressure on the assassins to wrap this up as quickly as possible. Which they do. Over the course of a year, Ezio takes out 9 of Savonarola's key lieutenants, while Paola and La Volpe stir up some discontent. While this is fun, the repetition starts to rear its ugly head about halfway through, reminding you this is basically just padding. As a DLC, sure, it has a lot of content, but the encounters don't feel quite as well designed, and so you end up having to cheese a few of them. So instead of going through each assassination one by one, I'm going to take a page out of Oliver Bowden's literal book and do a montage. So while this shit plays in the background, let's get you caught up. See, Savonarola, either because the apple is scrambling his noodle, or because he's incredibly lame, is making people throw out their shit and burn it. He's convinced the world is going to end, and they need to cleanse themselves of sin and desire or something. I'll be honest, I was half in the bag by the time I wrapped this DLC up, but from what I can gather, he's prophesized the world is going to end a few times and those dates have come and gone, which means everyone knows he's kind of full of shit. It's kind of hard to keep people distracted when you're making them burn anything nice they own. Games, books, the usual stuff that sates society's tendency to revolt. That's where the name of this DLC comes from, Bonfire of the Vanities. Finally, the man himself makes an appearance, and before he can use the apple to calm the rioters down, Ezio shoots it out of his hand. This leaves the masses to scoop up the mad monk and a Borgia speed freak to pick up the apple. That doesn't last long. Catching back up with Savonarola and they whipped up that steak quick. I guess when you're bored as shit, a public execution is going to get even the laziest fucker out of bed, but they want to burn Savonarola. This is fair from their eyes, but Ezio knows he was never strong enough to wield the apple. A hidden blade in the jugular is totally fair game though. Or through the cheek, I guess. Man, I think Ezio might just be making the situation worse. With Savonarola dead, and people reacting the same way they would if you were at the movies and the power went out, Ezio decides to take this time to grandstand and preach a little truth.
Silenzio! Silenzio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers. It taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, to show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me or anyone else.
Now that you've been appropriately inspired, here's where I have some bad news. Even having collected Codex Pages this entire time, when I showed up to the next mission at Monteriggioni, I saw I couldn't finish the game because I had 29 out of 30 pages. I wasn't too peeved, but this is yet another reminder that you need to pace yourself throughout this game and make sure to collect Codex Pages when you're near them. And see, that's why that giant time gap doesn't perplex me all that much. I mean, in real life, if there were 30 pages you had to collect spread throughout your country, it would take a while. The assassins had to do everything they could to beg, borrow, and steal the remaining Codex Pages. So after a brief excursion, I now have the last Codex Page, which we bring to Leonardo, who's now rooming with us, I guess. He translates it, we put it in the wall, solve the slide puzzle, plug an HDMI cord into the Apple, switch to input 1, and we finally see a map of the world. Of course, they have to point out that there are some continents that they don't recognize, because, you know, it's 1492 and all that, but they do manage to find the location of the vault, and to their horror, it's in Rome. This is why Rodrigo wanted to become Pope. Wait, did I tell you that? Well, yeah, Rodrigo Borgia is now Pope, like the Pope. But before we can go kill the Pope, a wild sentence I never thought I'd write, Mario reminds us that the codexes are referring to 2 pieces of Eden.
The Codex always spoke of 2 keys. 2 pieces of Eden needed to open the vault. One is the apple.
And the other is the staff. The papal staff is the second piece of Eden.
For years, no, decades, we've sought these answers.
And now, at last, we have them.
But so too could the Spaniard. And if he does, if he finds a way into the vault, its contents will make the apple seem a trifling thing.
I must go to Roma and find the vault. What of the rest of you?
We'll do what we do best. Cause some trouble in the city, giving you the freedom to conduct your search.
With the rest of the assassins set to cause some trouble in Rome so we can investigate relatively undetected, we set out. Roma, 1499. Ezio is now 40 years old, and finally taking that trip he'd always talked about to the Vatican, starting his tourist romp through the city at the Sistine Chapel. Anyway, we have to fight through a bunch of guards, complete some stealth puzzles, but as a reward, instead of having to sit through mass, we get to do this.
I thought I was beyond this. But I'm not. I've waited too long. Lost too much. Requiescat in pace, you bastard.
I don't think so.
And it's time for another boss fight. Luckily, Ezio's learned a few tricks while playing with the apple, so he creates 4 copies of himself to help fight Rodrigo. Not that it matters, because after we deplete his health bar, he pulls a little disappearing act, steals the apple, stabs Ezio again. Man, his abdomen has to look like a tic-tac-toe board at this point. But of course, yada yada yada, plot armor, Ezio gets back up like nothing happened and follows Rodrigo into the secret passage. Of course, he can't just shoot him because we need another exposition dump, so Ezio is all like, hey, let's drop our weapons and punch each other, which is fine with me. I'm sure the Vatican might have some legal issues with the man-on-man encounter being consensual, but we're too close to the end to start squabbling now. Finally, we have Rodrigo right where we want him, about to kill him, and Ezio stops just short because killing him won't bring his family back. Grabbing the staff and opening the vault, as the real prophet should, we get to the last true mic drop of the game. The goddess Minerva reveals that her kind were some kind of forerunners. No, not those. And wait, is she looking at the camera?
What are you talking about? There's no one else here.
Enough. I do not wish to speak with you, but through you. You are the prophet. You've played your part. You anger him, but please be silent, that we may commune. Listen. When we were still flesh and our home still whole, your kind betrayed us. We who made you. We who gave you life. We were strong, but you were many. And both of us craved war. So busy were we with earthly concerns, we failed to notice the heavens. And by the time we did, the world burned until naught remained but ash. It should have ended then and there. But we built you in our own image. We built you to survive. And so we did. Few were our numbers, your kind and mine. It took sacrifice, strength, compassion, but we rebuilt. And as life returned to the world, we endeavored to ensure this tragedy would not be repeated. But now we are dying, and time will work against us. Truth turned into myth and legend. What we built, misunderstood. Let my words preserve the message and make a record of our loss. But let my words also bring hope. You must find the other temples, built by those who knew to turn away from war. They worked to protect us, to save us from the fire. If you can find them, if their work can be saved, so too might this world. Be quick, for time grows short, and guard against the cross, for there are many who will stand in your way. It is done. The message is delivered. We are gone now from this world. All of us. We can do no more. The rest is up to you, Desmond.
What? Who is Desmond? I don't understand. Please, wait. I have so many questions.
What the fuck?
As the credits roll, we watch the modern-day assassins pack up, just in time too, as Abstergo has caught up with them and Vidic is pissed. We fight through the masses of guards, thankful once again no one thought to bring a gun, with Vidic just out of reach, standing in the back of a truck. But like his ancestor before him, Desmond figures, you know what, we can kill as many of these little guys as we want, but the big guys, they can live. As the crew climbs into the van, we get one final lore drop from Lucy before jumping back into the Animus for a post-game wrap-up.
Alright, but I got some questions first. I mean, what the hell was that in the vault?
What you saw proves everything I was afraid of. The Templars aren't our biggest threat. Not by a long shot.
So what, the sun is? What's it gonna do, cook the Earth?
I doubt it, but I don't know. There's been some speculation that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening. A sufficiently strong flare could flip the poles and cause a geomagnetic reversal. It's all theoretical, but if it happens, the planet could become geologically unstable. Very unstable.
It's meant to be the stuff of pseudoscience, but clearly something catastrophic happened to the people of the first civilization. And that woman, what was her name? Minerva, was it? She seemed to think we were due for a second round.
So either way, we're fucked.
I don't know yet. We'll keep reviewing the tapes. And you can keep digging through your memories. Maybe there's more to discover.
Alright. Guess I better get started.
Now, remember the glyph puzzles I mentioned earlier? Completing all of them unlocks the completed sequence, which is playing on screen now. What you're looking at is Adam and Eve, at least the Assassin's Creed version of them. They're free-running their way through a utopian-looking environment where they pass by a window of what looks like a factory, with human slaves being controlled by what looks like Minerva holding a piece of Eden. On the rooftop, we hear,
Adam, I have it!
Eve!
Look out!
Before a quick cut to some binary. This spells out Eden for those of you who are curious, and the AC Wiki points out that there are 20 zeros and 12 ones. Because, you know, geomagnetic reversal, 2012, doomsday, yeah, all that. So there we have it, Assassin's Creed 2. From Ubisoft's position, it succeeded in exactly what they wanted it to. It was another smash hit. Within 6 months of its release, it had sold over 9 million copies. And in terms of improving upon everything that was panned about the first game, I can confidently say it did that as well. It delivered a more cohesive story, advanced the gameplay, and established trends that would be carried throughout the series. But now that I've completed it, in hindsight, I don't think it shows its age all that much, but it doesn't feel like it's the definitive Assassin's Creed experience it's often lauded as. I'm reminded heavily of Halo 2, a game that also brought its series closer to what we can recognize it as today, but ended rather abruptly, leaving us feeling frustrated, not because the story isn't over, but because we had unanswered questions. AC2's story, in my mind, will forever be 95% complete. It's like they brought us so close but just didn't finish. In fact, I remember the first time I beat it, it was right after I'd beaten AC1, and I remember thinking, really? Another cliffhanger? The only reason this is stuck in my mind so well is because almost immediately after beating it, my mom came into my room with a basketball, which I'd never played, and told me to bring it down to the kids down the street who just moved in, an attempt to get me out of the house that ended up with me meeting some of my best friends even to this day. Maybe you consider that to be an unnecessary detail, but I think it's fitting that I end this retrospective the same way the game it's based on ended. You have the gist of what I'm saying, but there's no definitive end to satisfy. Sometimes life's just like that, I suppose. This has been an escape from my analog nightmare. Good luck in yours.